of Stanton County.
Tom Brandt, District 32, Fillmore Thayer, Jefferson, Saline, and southwestern Lancaster counties.
Bruce Bostelman, District 23, Saunders, Butler, Colfax counties.
Michaela Cavanaugh, District 6, West Central Omaha, Douglas County.
Barry DeKay, District 40, representing Holt, Knox, Cedar, Antelope, northern part of Pierce, and most of Dixon County.
We also have as committee counsel Mike Hibble and Carolyn Nebel, who is our committee clerk. Assisting us as well in our committee are the pages Delaney and Logan. Delaney is studying political science at UNL, and Logan is studying international business at UNL. And this afternoon, we will be hearing 5 bills, and we'll be taking them in the order listed on the outside of the room. On the table near the entrance of the room, you will find blue testifier sheets. If you're planning to testify today, please fill one out and hand it to the pages when you come up. This will help us keep an accurate record of the hearing. If you do not wish to testify, but you would like to go on record with your presence here at the hearing, please fill out the gold sheet on the table near the entrance. Also, I would like to note the legislature's policy that all letters for the record must be received by the committee by noon the day prior to the hearing. Any handouts submitted by testifiers will also be included as part of the record as exhibits. We ask if you have any handouts, please bring 10 copies and give them to the page. If you need additional copies, the pages will be happy to provide those to you. Understand that senators may come and go during our hearings. This is common and required, as they may be presenting bills in other committees. For our hearing, the testimony for each bill will begin with the introducer's opening statement. After the opening statement, we will hear from any supporters of the bill, then from those in opposition, and then from those in the neutral capacity. The introducer of the bill will then be given the opportunity to make closing statements if they wish to do so. We ask that you begin your testimony by giving your first and last name and spelling them for the record. We will be using a 5-minute light system today. When you begin your testimony, the light on the table will turn green. The yellow light is your 1-minute warning, and when the red light comes on, we ask that you wrap up your final thoughts. I would like to remind everyone, including senators, to please turn off your cell phones or put them on vibrate. And with that, we will begin today's hearing with LB 465. Senator Mosier, you are welcome to open.
Thank you, Chair Geist, and good afternoon, fellow members of the Transportation and Telecommunications Committee. My name is Mike Moser, it's Mikemoser, and I represent District 22, which consists of Platte County and parts of Stanton County. I'm introducing LB 465 at the request of the Department of Motor Vehicles. The bill reallocates document fees currently directed to the State General Fund to the DMV Cash Fund. Increased costs for fixed operational expenses are outpacing the increases in revenue. This bill does not increase document fees nor change the amount of fees being allocated to the county general fund. Section 1 of the bill reallocates from the general fund to the DMV Cash Fund the portion of the document fee for issuance and replacement of state identification cards, issuance and replacement of Class O and Class M operator licenses, issuance and replacement of provisional operators permits, issuance and replacement of learners permits, issuance and replacement of school permits, issuance and replacement of commercial driver's licenses, issuance and replacement of commercial learners permits, issuance and replacement of farm permits, and adding or removing restrictions, endorsements, or classes on any operator's license or permit. Section 2 provides for an operative date of July 1st, 2023. I appreciate the opportunity to come testify before you today, and I would be glad to answer any questions. There is a copy of the bill, I believe, in your folder, and it has stricken the amounts that used to go to the general fund, and now if this bill is approved by our committee and of course the legislature, then those funds will go into the cash fund to help operate the DMV. So right now they're a cash agency, and they were actually charging enough in fees to put some of that into the general fund, and we've had this discussion before. Senator Cavanaugh brought that up in previous sessions. So this would take some of that money that's now going into the general fund and putting it into the DMV cash fund, because their cash fund is projected to have a deficit in the new budget that they're proposing. If we leave things the same, they'll have a deficit. So this hopefully will offset that. And frankly, Director Lom would have much better technical information than I do. I'm introducing the bill to help the DMV, and so if you want to pick on somebody, go ahead and pick on me, but if you want to know something, you ask me.
Are there
Any questions?
any questions from the committee? I think you're in the clear.
Okay.
Nobody's going to pick on you. Are you going to stay for close?
Oh, sure, I'm here for the duration.
All right.
Well, I got another bill later, but I'll promise.
Are there any proponents for this legislation?
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Geist and members of the Transportation and Telecommunications Committee. I am Rhonda Lamb, RHONDALAHM, Director of the Department of Motor Vehicles. I'm appearing before you today to offer testimony in support of LB 465. I would like to thank Senator Mosher for introducing LB 465 on behalf of the DMV. The purpose of the bill is to provide a funding mechanism to stabilize the DMV cash fund due to revenue shortfalls. Section 1 of the bill reallocates from the general fund to the DMV cash fund the portion of the document fee for issuance and replacement of all types of state identification cards, driver licenses, and permits. Section 2 provides for an operating date of July 1, 2023. The DMV is fully funded by cash funds generated by user fees and receives no general fund appropriations. The budget proposal for the next biennium, however, projects a deficit balance by the end of the biennium. LB 465 will better align these user fees to cover agency expenses and close the deficit balance. The DMV has historically been very mindful of the use of allocated funds. Over the past several years, the DMV has not spent all of the monies authorized by the legislature, usually around 90% of the agency appropriation. Just going back 6 years, this has allowed us to keep over $18 million in the bank to be used for future years. The DMV is proposing the portion of the current document fees allocated to the state general fund be reallocated to the DMV cash fund rather than an increase in fees. There would be no change to the amount of the document fees allocated to the county general fund. The reallocation of these fees provides the stability needed for the future of the DMV cash fund. I encourage the advancement of LB 465 to the general file. Chairwoman Geist, at this time, I'd be happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Great. Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions? Yes, Senator Kavanaugh.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, Director Lamb.
Sure.
What has caused this change in the fund?
So really it even goes back longer than 6 years, or probably even 10 or so. But what we have is a pretty stable amount of revenues, because our revenues come mostly from driver's license fees, which don't change a lot from year to year, title fees, which don't change a lot from year to year, suspension and revocation reinstatement fees, which actually are going down, record fees, vehicle record fees, and some plate fees. So our revenues change plus or minus 1% or so. Well, operating expenses, when I say fixed operating expenses, I'm talking about the things we have no control over. So technology charges, rent, postage, salaries, benefits, those kinds of things continue to go up at that higher pace. So over the years, we've been watching this, and we've known that at some point in time, we're going to have to do something about our revenue, but we had enough in the bank, so to speak, to cover it until now. But now we're in a situation where we need to take a look at what is another revenue source.
So the 18 million, do we no longer have that in the bank?
No, it was in the bank, but we've been using that up.
Right.
Had we been spending our full appropriation, we would have been here $18 million ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so if we do this is estimated to be 4.3 million.
That's correct.
And annually, this will be annual.
Correct.
So how long will this provide sustainability? Will you be able to still put some into the bank again?
Yeah. So what they recommend for cash funded agencies is they recommend that we maintain a balance of at least 25% of our operating budget in the year. So for us, that's about 8 million-ish. So we should have in the bank at all times at least $8 million. So what this does is it'll kind of make up for that deficit. And again, we try really hard that we don't spend all of our appropriation. I mean, if we don't need it, we don't spend it. So that way we can save a little. But our projection is that this would address it, at least for any foreseeable future we can see, unless there's something really unexpected we're not planning for.
So I'm more long-term asking questions, so
Sure.
we may have to revisit increasing fees. Is that possible? That's not what you're asking for
No.
today.
Right. So I'm going to call that probably AR after Rhonda. That's a waste of money.
Okay, all right. Got it, thanks.
Any other questions from the committee? Yes, Senator Boston.
Thank you, Chairman, guys. Excuse me. Thank you, Director Lamb. I want to follow on the more immediate. So these are funds that you're requesting because those funds went to general funds.
They're-
So now you're redirecting them here. Is this more of a budget question for DM for you, or is it more of a, really receiving the funds that you should have received a long time ago?
Well,
If that makes sense.
yeah, so the legislature many years ago split the allocation of fees between our cash fund, the state general fund, and the county general funds. It's been that way for years. My understanding is why that occurred is we used to be a general funded agency. And then I think it was in the mid-90s where that kind of switched over. And that's when they then allocated part of the fee to the general fund because we were still getting some general fund appropriations. But then we got to the situation where we didn't need general fund appropriations and the fees covered it. And so they still just kept allocating fees to the general fund because that's just the way it was. And so now we're at the situation where costs have increased over the last 20 years for all those things I mentioned, plus other things. But our revenue base pretty much stays the same. And so eventually now it's caught up. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Yeah, I believe it does. It's funds that were there that you could have had all along in a sense. But since you didn't need them at the time.
Yeah.
So in a sense, it is a bit of a budget issue. But more so, I guess I'm looking at this as funding that you could have had access to all along and you didn't because you didn't need it. So now we're just calling it in.
Versus, a fee increase when the funds are there to be used, so.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? I don't see any, Director. Thank you for your
Thank you.
testimony. Any other proponents for LB 465? Are there any opponents for LB 465? Good afternoon.
I didn't cause you a big cut there, sorry. Hi,
Hi there.
I'm Chris Costello, CHRIS, COSTELLO. Come before you in opposition to this Bill LB 465. Want to nip it in the butt, as a great senator has said before. I think that this is being green-lighted in an effort to try to answer a question or a problem that's been raised through the public media about 11% of unregistered voters with no forms of ID within our elections. And the solution is we're going to give out free IDs. And my history, we might as well then contemplate and lower the drinking age to 18, because when you start giving out free government IDs, it doesn't stop at your needed 11% of undocumented voters. It'll go and go and go and go. And that's why at least at minimum, you need to charge a fee so that you can audit the authentic, the trueness of the person getting it, I think this may be an effort to cover the 11% and say that's great, but it doesn't end there. So that's just why I've come before you.
Interesting. Are there any questions on the committee? I don't see any. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Any other opponents? Is there anyone who'd like to testify in a neutral capacity? Senator Mosier, you are welcome to close on 465.
Since Director Lamb already testified, I just had a question for her. She said that IDs, there's a fee for everything they do, including IDs. So the problem is that they had a big surplus and they thought that's too much to hold. So they spend it down. Now they're to the point where they're going to be overdrawn if they don't do something. So your options are raise fees. I'm waiting for somebody to wave no to that. And, or give less service, make people wait longer to get permits and IDs and whatever, and that's not a good solution. So I think their solution to take some of that money and put it into their cash fund is a good idea. So, there are any other questions?
Are there any questions on the committee? I don't see any. Thank you.
Okay, that's the end of that one.
All right.
Well, let's hope it's not the end, but for
Just
today.
the beginning. You may open on LB 484. We'll wait just one moment so the page can change that for
Change
those
the
who are
placard.
watching. Mhm. Thank you, Logan. You may open on 484.
Thank you, Chair Geist. Good afternoon, fellow members of the Transportation and Telecommunications Committee. My name is Mike Moser. It's Mikemoser, and I represent District 22, which is Platte County and parts of Stanton County. I'm introducing 484 at the request of the Nebraska Independent Auto Dealers Association, Department of Motor Vehicles. It's NIADA. The purpose of the bill is to professionalize independent dealers within motor vehicle industry. It places educational requirements for independent dealers applying for a new license and renewing their existing license. Independent dealers applying for a new license will be required to have 8 hours of educational material completed, approved by the Motor Vehicle Industry Licensing Board. Independent dealers renewing their license would have to complete 4 hours of continuing education during the calendar year. These educational requirements would not apply to franchise dealers. I appreciate the opportunity to testify in front of you today, and members of the NIADA will follow with supporting testimony, and I'm sure they'll have better answers to some of your questions than I might have. So if you have questions, I'd be glad to answer.
Questions on the committee? Senator DeBoer.
I'm definitely not trying to pick on you, Senator Moser.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, since you said, what's the nature of the continuing education that they would receive?
Well, from my understanding of it, which I got from this group, is that right now there's no continuing education requirement. You have to get the license to sell cars, and there are requirements for, insurance and whatever, but I don't think there's a requirement for them to actually know the rules. So they could start selling cars and may not be familiar with all the laws, that there's things they're supposed to follow in the law. And so it might make customers unhappy if something goes wrong because of a dealer that didn't know all the ins and outs of it. So
So
I
this
think,
would be primarily to educate them about changes in the law for
well,
a dealership?
continuing education would be changes, but just the basic education, if you want to sell cars, I think you have to get approved, and there's no requirement to know anything about the business to speak of. If, you just sell cars. And I think that this would require that they complete some either in-person or online training, and there are questions about this particular part of the law, and then, well, it's kind of like we did in English comprehension. You read a paragraph, and then you answer a few questions about it. And, what's the deadline for doing this once you've sold a car? And how long can you do this? I mean, there are all kinds of rules, and I don't know what they are, but
Maybe ask the.
yeah, there'll be people following me that know the ins and outs of it. Generally, this isn't my philosophy, making new regulations, but I talked to some car dealers, independent car dealers in my district that supported it. And so I thought I'd bring it and see what the committee says and what the legislature as a whole says about it, so.
Any other questions from, yes, Senator Frederickson?
Thank you, Chair Geist. Similar kind of, so I understand we don't currently have any continuing education requirements in the state.
I
on
don't
this.
believe so.
Okay. And then my other question was, how would this compare to other states? Do other states have this model in place, or?
I think that'd be a better answer for Mr. Kier when he comes up. I believe other states have it, but again, I'm speculating, and you're never supposed to answer a question from an attorney unless you really know the answer, so.
Well, I'm not an attorney for the record, but yes.
Senator DeBoer we'll blame her. Other questions?
Are there any other questions on the committee?
Okay,
I don't see any. Thank you for your
thank
testimony.
you.
I assume you're going to stick around and close.
Sure.
Any proponents? Good afternoon.
Hello. Thank you for letting me testify. My name is Chad Tessman, ChadTessman. I reside in Henderson, Nebraska. And I am the president of the Nebraska Independent Auto Dealers Association. I'm also an independent auto dealer. And I am also on was put onto the Nebraska Dealer Licensing Board by this committee, committee in the past. So one thing we look at is I became a dealer. I left a new car dealership, opened my own dealership about 12 years ago, handed very little knowledge. I had some knowledge just from the workings of a new car dealership, but really it was like trial and error. It was, kind of had a good idea of what to do, but didn't know all the titling rules, didn't know all the advertising rules, was handed a pamphlet that, covered some stuff. I went out and sought my own education through different areas. That's when I got involved with the Nebraska Independent Auto Dealers Association. Sought my own education that way, and it was very helpful, not only through the association, but getting to know other dealers. But what we've seen a lot of is people come in, don't know really what they're doing, kind of the first couple years, kind of make their way through it. You're putting customers at risk, title errors. You're putting customers at risk with, not getting titles done, not getting paperwork done correctly, not knowing, what you're supposed to disclose. There's all kinds of issues. Nebraska is one of the states. I went this summer to the National Independent Auto Dealers Association conference. Took a poll in our state president's meeting of how many places had continuing education or pre-licensing or both. Nebraska was one of the few. There was 4 that did not. Now that wasn't 4 out of 50. That was 4 out of the states that are involved. There's many states that have no involvement in the National Association. So we think it would be a fantastic thing for the state, not only for the dealers to do better business, but to protect the consumer, and also just to make our state a place where, you know, we're not having so many issues with customer complaints to the licensing board with that sort of issue. So I want to thank Senator Moser for introducing this for us. And if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer more.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions? Yes, Senator Bostrom.
Thank you, Chairman Geis. Thank you for being here today, Mr. Testman. First question I have is if a person doesn't receive this continuing education, what happens to them? Do they lose their license?
I would say that would be so when I go to renew my license as an independent auto dealer, I send in a bond. I send in proof that I have insurance, and then the fee essentially to renew my license. Well, if I didn't have a bond, I couldn't renew my license. So I would assume that if you didn't have your training, then you could not renew your license.
So then you'd lose your license. You said on a board, state board, so you're president of the.
I'm the president of the Independent Auto Dealers Association, but I'm also on the licensing board.
So on the Independent Auto Owners Association, you have a board.
Yes.
Does that board provide education and training?
Yes. We actually, just 2 weeks ago, we had our yearly convention where we provided quite a bit of training. We had 3 new dealers there, 2 of which were very eager for information. One of them, when I introduced myself, he says, I just want to make sure I'm doing my paperwork right, which was kind of a big sign to me, like you already have a dealer's license and you don't know how to do your paperwork right. But yes,
So does your board have any say in whether a license is granted or not?
our board, the association does not. No, has nothing to do with that.
I think the last question for right now is, do you know what franchises are not part of this? Do they do training?
Franchises are, number one, are a little more, there's fewer franchises and they're more, I wouldn't say permanent, but they don't come and go as much as independent auto dealers. You can have an independent auto dealer open up in February and close by March or June and open up a different one in November. I mean, they can come and go, whereas independent or franchises, they're dealing with the franchise. They get a lot of training through the franchise. I know where I worked prior to being an independent dealer, they were very heavy on training. And you had people that were in certain roles, whereas independents, you have an owner that's doing paperwork, buying cars, cleaning the toilets, washing the cars. I mean, you have lots of hats.
One last question.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I guess the last question would be is, how do they differ? How do you differ than any other business person? Any other business person, no matter what the business is, have to come up with, they may be a licensing, they may have safety issues, they may have those things as well. So why is this any different than any other person starting out a new business, trying to figure out all the things that they have to know in order to stay within the boundaries of the law, I guess you'd say?
Sure. Well, I guess, there is many types of businesses. People get very emotional and upset when they have issues with cars. Matter of fact, a lot of times I say it'd be nice to be a doctor because people come in and just say whatever the doctor says, we're just going to do, and you get the bill 3 months later, and it just is what it is. Whereas a car dealership, there's lots of different car dealers and lots of different confrontations. And so when you have people that can't take their car and drive to their job because they don't have a title and it's been 30 days, and not getting answers from the dealer about what's going on. It creates a very emotional situation. Whereas if you go in to get your hair cut and the person hasn't had any education, they may just mess up your hair. But you can still go to work. You're not going to get a ticket for having a bad haircut. So there's a lot of big deals there. So,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yes, Senator DeBoer.
Thank you, Senator Grimes. So how frequently must you renew your license?
every year
Every year?
in November.
And who are you imagining would be offering the educational seminars?
So it could be offered by, I guess in our imagination, it'd be a nonprofit type of business.
Does that,
We would offer it, but we would not by any means limit it to, or want it limited to just us. So
and who would approve or disapprove of the educational offerings?
that's going to be, that would probably be up to the licensing board.
And then who pays for it? Who pays
The dealer would need to pay for it.
So the dealer would be required to pay for these classes that the licensing board would approve from whoever would be willing to offer them.
Correct. And that's how it's done in the states that I've talked to some other directors in other states, and that's kind of how they do that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Senator Frederickson.
Thank you. Can you maybe shed some light on what the current requirements are for licensure? You mentioned sort of,
Yeah.
with Senator Boston.
So if you wanted to be a new dealer, you have to have a lease on a property that I think it can house 10 vehicles for sale at minimum.
Okay.
You have to have a sign with your phone number, has to be a landline phone number. So you have to have a lease, yeah, it has to be zoned correctly. You have to have a bond, a $50,000 bond, and then insurance, and then, it's been a while. You have to have
I'm sorry, but so you get the example of maybe not knowing how to do the paperwork, right?
Sure.
So there's no requirement of knowledge of selling a car process.
When I got mine in 2011, I was handed a packet that just had some examples.
Okay.
And I kind of knew what I was doing because I'd been in the business. But I made mistakes. I made, for example, on a Nebraska title, it could say John Jones or Susan Jones. So who needs to sign that title? Well, John or Susan. Well, no, in Nebraska, or actually means and. You have to both sign. I got in a situation my first year where I'm 5 months later and I didn't have another signature. And I had to try to track down the person. Kid's dad didn't want to sign. I had to almost beg the kid's dad to sign. He said, well, I never wanted him to sell that car in the first place. I'm like, I didn't know what the heck I was doing. So, it can be difficult if you're just kind of winging it.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I don't see anything.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Clint, C-L-A-N-T, Jones, J-O-N-E-S. I'm the Vice President of the Independent Auto Dealers. I'm also on the licensing board. I've been a car dealer. I've been in the car business for 35 years. I was a CFO for a dealer group that had, franchise dealer group that had stores in 4 states, and have been an independent dealer for 12 years. So I think where I'm going to start is maybe to continue on some of the questions that were asked. And Senator Boston, when you asked about, does the Nebraska Independent Auto Dealers do training? We do, but only to our members. Only the people that come to us do we offer that training. I will train anybody that calls me. I don't care if it's a competitor across the street from me, I'll help them. but they don't call. They just mess up. And unfortunately, the barrier to entry to being a car dealer is way too low. And, you know, you asked about the requirement to be a dealer. Yes, you have to have insurance. You have to have a $50,000 bond. To get a $50,000 bond, yes, you have to be somewhat stable or have somebody that will go on with you to get that bond. So you yourself not be that stable, but you get a couple buddies to go on with you and you three-way a $50,000 bond. That doesn't in and of itself really qualify the person to be a good business person and represent our industry the way that we want to be represented. I mean, the reality is, and we all know, I mean, we joke about it, we're used car dealers. And we're trying to hold ourselves and our peers to a higher standard is what we're doing. There were some questions about states, other states. I just did a quick search yesterday. California, Colorado, Florida, Georgia, Idaho, Illinois, Iowa, Louisiana, Michigan, Mississippi, this goes on. I mean, they all have had mandatory continuing education. By trade, I'm an accountant. I'm not a car dealer. What a weird combination. But so in my prior career as a CFO, I handled obviously accounting. I handled acquisitions. We bought a lot of dealerships, but I handled compliance. And compliance is a big deal. The Federal Trade Commission has released, it's called the Safeguards Rule. And what it is it's a rule that they're putting in place for specifically car dealers on protecting consumer data and how our computer systems, the architecture behind our computer system. This is thousands of pages. And there was a deadline that was supposed to go into effect early January, and they've actually extended it. If I were to poll 100 independent auto dealers in the state of Nebraska, I would be shocked if 5 even knew about it. And so the ongoing trade that we talk about, there you go. This is new stuff that's coming. And yes, regulation, laws do change, rules do change at the state level. And we need to do it right at the state level, but there's a lot of federal things involved as well that we do train on. One of them being the most obvious, that as-is sticker that's on the window of every car on a lot. That's a federal document. That's not a state document. Our dealers don't know this. And I think that we can do a lot of good. I think that I had a couple other points I wanted to touch on. On the licensing board, we see a lot of repeat infractions where dealers, the complaints are coming in on the same things over and over and over. So that would be an example of something that we would train on. You know, we'll work with the licensing board and we'll focus on things that are coming up. And is that yellow light for me? Have I been talking for 5 minutes?
You, only 4, that's your 1 minute warning.
Oh, I
So
was gonna
it's,
say.
it's gonna run out here though, here in just a minute.
So anyway.
Actually, now it
It
is.
did. Ah, shoot. Ask me about the franchise dealers, why they shouldn't have to do it.
May I ask you a quick question
Yeah.
before someone else asks you that question? You talked about updating that there is a requirement to update your software. Is that a federal requirement to update your software that only about 5 people you would think knew about it? Is there a penalty for not doing that?
Well, that's a good question. And we haven't seen the final version of the safeguards rule yet because I think they've kind of been sent back to the drawing board a little bit. Consumer data protection is a big deal. And so what I've done in my store is I've worked with my software vendors to make sure that we're compliant. And if there's an area where I think maybe they're pulling my leg, I'm making them sign off on it. So I have a signed document by Fraser Computing or whoever it is that says, yes, any information that we're sharing is encrypted. Well, so I'm kind of I understand technology a little bit, maybe more than the average person, not real good about it. So if I have my doubts that it is,
You're going to do it?
mhm,
Okay,
yeah.
okay. Thank you.
You're
That's,
welcome.
that's interesting. Are there any questions in the committee? Yes.
Sure. I'll ask.
Senator Boswell.
Thank you, Chairman.
Wondered if you would take that.
Just, and I appreciate, I think it's important dialogue to have, I understand. So this only applies to a new dealer, correct? It's 8 hours continuing for an applicant. Is that for renewal of license and then 4 hours, so it's a total of 12 hours?
No, I'm glad you asked for clarification. So if a new licensee applies for a license, they've never had a dealer license before, that would be new dealer training, and that's an 8-hour requirement. Then existing dealers like myself or Mr. Testman, we would be required, and we haven't nailed it down whether it's annually or every 2 years. Other states vary, so we want to talk with them a little bit about it, but we're looking at annually. So that training requirement would be less because they've already gone through the new dealer training. In theory, they understand the paperwork and things like that, so they've gotten that past that.
So in the bill that talks about continuing education credits, and that the board then approves those credits, depends on what it is. So do the other states, do they have a list of resources that you go to take so many hours so you know that it's approved or something, what you need to do?
Yeah, so the way that the states that I've really studied and got on the phone and talked with their directors, the equivalent of their licensing board would approve the curriculum and the vendor that's permitted to do this training. So in essence, all their vendors are going to be teaching the same curriculum. But I think they're more looking at the delivery method. I think that there needs to be accountability in that training system. In other words, you can't just click the mouse and say play and then go to the golf course, because that's all car dealers really do is play golf. And then come back and it's done and I did my training. So Senator Moser kind of talked about that reading comprehension or whatever, you watch a 5-minute segment on a given topic and it asks you 3 questions. And they're not trick questions. They're questions did you watch it? I mean, do you comprehend what you're watching? Very basic.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? I don't see any. Thank you for your
Thank you.
testimony. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents to LB 484? Is any opponents? Anyone who'd like to testify in the neutral capacity? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Senator Geis, members of the committee. My name is Lloyd Todd. It's Loytodd. I'm the president and legal counsel for the Nebraska New Car and Truck Dealers Association. The reason we have chosen to testify in a neutral capacity is because we're exempt from this, and I felt a little uncomfortable coming in and being on any other part of it. I'll tell you that for the last 34 years, my primary job has been to educate my dealers. I represent about 200 new car dealers in the state of Nebraska. We have had 100% membership penetration as long as I can remember, because we are so highly regulated that my dealers need this constant training and information. The factories supply it to my members. We supply it to my members. And I'm going to just scan just I want to tell you that twice this week I got calls from new licensees. And we sell a lot of the forms that dealers use because it's very expensive to produce them. I draft lots of them. They come in and say, I got a license, what do I need? What do I need for forms? It's not our job to teach them, but we try to give them a packet of what they'll need. But just like the safeguards rule that was just mentioned by the gentleman, that is actually the law now. It is not being revised. It's been delayed until about May. The fine for failure to follow it is $40,000. The smallest fine I can find of all the regulated items that these dealers are responsible for, and it's not just my dealers, it's them too. The smallest fine I can find is about $10,000 by the feds, and the state does not enforce that. These folks need to know. I don't want to embarrass anybody. There are 1,100 used car dealers or licensees in the state. They have fewer than 100 that belong to their association and actually participate. Their goal is to compel some of that. But I'll just laundry list them very quickly. Equal Credit Opportunity Act, Regulation B, Federal Consumer Leasing Act, Regulation M, Truth in Lending Act, Regulation Z, Cooling Off Rule, Unfair Trade Practices Act, Adverse Action Notices, Privacy Notice, Red Flags Rule, Risk-Based Pricing Notices, Safeguards Rule, Used Car Rule. I can go around to dealer lots all over this state and find there's a required form on every used car that's on any of these lots. It's the as-is sticker. Is there a warranty included? Is it gone? How much is expired there? That's a $40,000 fine for not having that. And they don't know it. And so, we really believe that this would be a real benefit out there. And I don't apologize for us being exempt because we don't need this. We do it. I haven't had a new franchisee in my memory. Those dealerships have been here forever, and the compliance. And many of these things require written programs within the dealership. The new requirements about a multifaceted verification system and records retention, because privacy is huge and it's so risky. And these dealers can have thousands of private information because they're participating in the financing. Under the federal law, even any dealer who sells, let's say they get 100 customers a month, they're covered by that. They're considered a financial institution under the FTC rules and the federal law. They're treated the same as a bank. If they turn you down, you come in and they look at your credit and say, it's terrible, we're not going to waste our time, that customer is entitled to an adverse action notice required by federal law. When they come in and talk about financing, they're required to have a risk-based pricing. We're required to do a privacy notice. There's cash reporting, structuring a deal. Somebody comes in and says, if I give you $11,000 for this car, can you take it? Well, we have to report it. That could actually end up with a fine. If it's bad enough, it can be jail sentence. Federal advertising rules, and that's not even mention the state requirements, and there are lots of them. Advertising laws and the various things. It's the second biggest purchase most people make in their life. And the average, I just looked it up again because the averages are going way up, but the average used car is about $30,000 now. And the bond's only $50,000. So I know I'm kind of a cheerleader for this, but not if we have to do it too. That's selfish, but we just don't need it. But I can tell you that people do. So with that, I would answer any questions.
Thank you. I think one of the things that's concerning about this to me is that granted, some of the dealers, the independent dealers might not know about this, but certainly the consumer doesn't know this hasn't taken place. And that's even a bigger concern because they're assuming that this person knows more than they know. And if all of those things aren't complied with or known, then they may not, and the consumer might assume that they do. So with that, are there any questions on the committee?
If I could just add one
Sure,
thing.
absolutely.
Very few lawyers in this state know about these laws either. And so when a deal goes bad, it's not unusual for me to get a phone call from maybe some of the law school friends or just people that know what I do, saying, hey, how's this work? And so it isn't just consumer, it's a narrow field.
Yeah.
And it's very complicated. So-
Thank you. Thank you for that testimony. No questions? Thank you for that. Any other neutral testimony? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Chairman Geis and committee members, my name is Josh Eichmeyer, Josh-Eickmeyer, the Executive Director for the Nebraska Motor Vehicle Industry Licensing Board. And I'm here this afternoon in the neutral capacity. Our agency would be the agency that would be regulating and enforcing this requirement if it were to become law. We're neutral on this. Obviously, if this is a requirement, we'll do everything we can to implement it. I did speak with Tim Keir previously regarding this bill, and nothing critical of the bill, just having questions because my background, personal background or experience with continuing education is with CLEs and the continuing legal education requirements for having a law license. And so just questions like, can you carry over hours? If you went to a 6-hour conference and you only needed 4 hours, can you carry over 2? Those kinds of questions that come up with CLEs before COVID. Only so many hours could be online, other hours had to be in person. That's been laxed during COVID. So those are the types of questions that I had with Tim, and in talking with Tim about that, my understanding would be is we could probably address most, if not all, of those concerns with rules and regulations in order to make sure that we can answer the questions that the dealer is going to ask us when somebody goes to renew their license on Christmas Day and we inform them they haven't met their 4-hour requirements for continuing education, and they're not aware of that. So we just want to make sure that we're in the best position to meet those expectations. And I feel I think this is the first time I've actually had an amount in the fiscal note, so I felt a little guilty about that. But we have our renewal licensing software is a couple years old now, and we've worked with Nebraska Interactive, which is now Tyler Technologies, on developing that. If this became a requirement, I would assume we would require the licensee to include the documentation or proof that they have met these requirements as part of that process. So that's why it's a vaguely specific number of 3,000 to 10,000, because even they weren't sure how involved it would be to require additional documentation to be submitted, and there would be some sort of a verification process, I assume, as well, to make sure they actually took the hours that they are claiming on the renewal. So other than that, I would just want to add, when we do have and there's me some confusion when they talk about a new dealer, there are franchise dealers that sell new vehicles, but when we talk about a new dealer, we're referring to a dealer that has an application to become a first-time dealer. When we do the first-time dealer, there are a number of statutory requirements they must meet. The bond, insurance, if they don't have workers' compensation coverage, then they would need a waiver if they qualify for the waiver. There's a number of requirements. There's also facility requirements, as was mentioned earlier. Once we have all the documents that we need and the application looks good, for lack of a better term, meets all the requirements, then we send that application to one of our investigators for that area. And then they will go and physically inspect the location. They're going to look to make sure that the sign is proper, that they have, a mailbox, they have the fund, they have room for 10 vehicles, space for 10 vehicles, that sort of thing. They do then take that time to educate the new dealer as far as answering any questions they have. They mentioned a packet. They receive a packet with sample purchase agreements, sample documents. Again, we're only doing the state side of it. We're not providing any federal requirements. So on the state side, that's what we're providing. And so with some, as was mentioned earlier, they run the gamut. You're going to have somebody that has grown up in the business, has been a salesperson, maybe their parents owned a dealership, and you have other people who have absolutely no background in this. So that's why on the inspection side of it, there is an opportunity, but again, the opportunity is only as good as the questions that are asked by the new applicant, because in some instances they just don't know what they don't know. So it's not obviously a perfect system from that standpoint. And then last thing I would just mention too is we do administrative enforcement and regulation. There's also a criminal side potentially to dealers who have violations. If the police get there before we do, they could be facing felony charges for various offenses. Our focus is again on education and also progressive compliance to get them back in line with what the state law requires. So the amber light's on. So I will stop. If there's any question, I'd be happy to try and answer them for you.
Great. Thank you for your testimony. Yes, Senator Kavanaugh.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Did I hear you say that you're such a dedicated public servant that you work on Christmas?
No. No. I said because we have great question. But no, because of the online renewal process we implemented, we do get applicants that here's what
You could have said yes.
yes, but here's the no, I'm not. Am I under oath? I'm so nervous right now. No, with the system we have is they can do the renewal anytime.
Okay.
And what typically happens is that the great reminder that their license has expired or is about to is when their tags on their dealer place expire. And that's usually the frantic phone call that we get is they realize that they haven't renewed their tags, but they can't renew their tags until they renew their license. And then that's when the panic sets in.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? I don't see any. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
Testimony. Any additional neutral testimony? I don't see any. And Senator Mosier, are you, there you are. Would you like to close? Senator Mosier will waive closing, and that will end the hearing on LB 484. And I do not have any letters of opposition or support. And Senator McDonald, you are welcome to open on LB 728. Welcome to
Thank you.
Transportation and Telecommunications.
Thank you, Chairperson Geist. My name is Mike McDonald, MIKEMCDONNELL. I represent Legislative District 5, South Omaha. LB 728, which would provide for boat trailers license plates and allow individuals to register these plates every 3 years. This legislative concept and change was brought to me by a friend. Currently in Nebraska, motorboat registrations are issued for 3-year periods, expiring on December 31st of the 3rd year, while trailer registration are required every year. The goal of this legislation is to provide an opportunity to align boat trailer licensing with that of the boat licensing on the 3rd year. This is just a real common sense. As I mentioned, a friend, we were having a discussion, and to let the committee know, and I'll work with you on this, when we sent it up to bill drafters, it was supposed to be revenue neutral. So it wasn't a way of saying if you're paying $10 every year and then you go on the 3rd year, therefore it would be $30. It wasn't trying to say, okay, then we reduced it by $20 in that 3-year period. That was not the goal, so we can work on that with you as a committee. It's just real simple. Every 3 years you go register the boat, the trailer matches up. Again, I think it's the best part of democracy. And just a friend and I having a discussion, and they said, what's the story with how this works? And Bill's here in the audience today, and I give him credit for bringing this forward. And it's just a real common sense, simple request.
Yes, Senator Brandt has a question.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Senator McDonald, for bringing this. So this would be the only trailer in the state of Nebraska that gets registered every 3 years if we pass this. Would that be correct?
If you define a boat trailer, yes.
Yeah, it's got two wheels and it goes down a highway, right?
With a boat on it,
With a boat on it, most of the time.
most of the time, yes.
Whereas all the other trailers I've got, I don't know how many I just registered the other day, 4 of them. I got to do this every year, enjoy my trip to Fairbury, pay for these trailers. Wouldn't another solution to this be licensed boats every year, so it'd be in sync with the trailers?
I would, going the exact opposite way of what I want to do, but
Yeah.
the idea of, I'd rather go with the idea of taking all the rest of the trailers and make them every 3 years to include the boat every 3 years, all trailers. I would think that'd be a friendly amendment to the legislation.
All right, thank you.
Senator Bostman has a question.
Thank you, two of you guys. Senator McDonald, could you define boat?
Something that floats on the water.
Reason why I ask is there's jet skis, there's wave runners, those type of things. I mean, they would all, when we say boat, there's sailboats, there's all different. So, I mean, your intention would be that all of those would be included in the term of boat. Is that-
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? I don't see any. Do you plan to stick around to close?
If you need me here, I'll definitely be here, so.
It's your call.
I'll be here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any proponents for LB 728? Any proponents? Good afternoon.
Chairperson Geist, members of the committee, thank you for being here. My name is Bill Hawkins, BILLHAWKINS. I'm a lifelong Nebraskan. I'm here as a proponent for this bill, and I guess I'm the only boat owner that's paying attention in the state of Nebraska. And I don't really understand that, but I've been a lifelong Nebraskan, and most of my life I've lived out by Branched Oak Lake. I started out motorboating but got tired of polluting the water. And with Senator Brandt, I have 2 trailers that I work with most of my life, hauling logs, trees, plants, whatever. And so I agree with the amendment that Senator Brandt has suggested, that we include all trailers in a 3-year rotation, and that we actually let us pay the fee all in 1 month, rather than have to come in April and then back in July. So if you have multiple trailers, it would make it a lot easier, but we can talk with that later. Just recently, at the end of this summer, I learned to sail. And it is the most incredible thing in the world to kick up on a boat and tighten that sail and fly with the wind. So as a progression of learning to sail and wanting to explore our great state of lakes, public recreation that we have, and the reason I've stayed here my whole life, I now have, as of an acquisition of a boat this weekend, of somebody moving that had to get rid of a sailboat, I now have 7 sailboats. So now I'm up to 9 trailers. So this is important to me because I plan on enjoying these boats. And so this is an important bill that I just happen to be paying attention to. And that's one reason with these public hearings, it came on real quick. And you have people around McConaughey or Lewis and Clark Lake who don't even know about this bill, who may have more trailers than me. And so I hope you take that into consideration, that I speak for a lot of sailboat people. I belong to the Lincoln Sail Club now. I told them about it at our banquet here this weekend, and everybody was busy and didn't really care. And I had no way of getting a hold of them and telling them the public hearing was today. So I appreciate your time and your interest. I know this is a minor bill in the mountain of bills that you have, but it's important to Nebraska because we are here for our recreation. And so if you would give thought to amending the bill to allow paying all at one time, multiple trailers, and with Senator Brandt, I'm all for including all non-commercial trailers that are the farmers' trailers and not landscape and construction trailers. So I thank you for your time, and I'd be happy for any questions.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Hawkins. Yes, Senator Brandt.
Thank you, Chairman, guys. Thank you, Mr. Hawkins, for your testimony.
Yes.
From a practical standpoint, though, there is an issue here that would need to be resolved. We get a sticker for all of our license plates every 12 months. And that sticker is a different color so that law enforcement knows whether you paid your registration. Now, if we throw a 3-year license into the mix, so now I get it licensed in 23, it doesn't expire till 26. It's going to be kind of a mind bender to figure out a system unless you reissue a different plate every 3 years so that law enforcement can identify whether you've paid your registration at the courthouse. Do you have any idea of how that could be
And
resolved?
you stated it right there, is reissuing the license plate. So it's distinctive for that 3 years. You recycle the license plates, and you have a different boat trailer. This bill is specifically boat trailers, and so you have that specific boat trailer. But then you also have the farm trailer that's very easily distinguished, and then that law enforcement officer doesn't have to look at that little sticker. He knows that that plate is, and then it would simplify the whole system of Western Nebraska, where you have to go miles and then you forgot the registration or you forgot this, or then next month you have to go back because you bought this trailer the day after you bought this one, and it's another month. And so that would really help a lot of Nebraskans.
I would suggest at the courthouse, at least in my courthouses, when we buy something out of sequence, I get everything licensed in January. So if I make a purchase of a trailer or a truck or a vehicle in October, they let me sync it up to January.
Ooh.
And so they should, I'd be surprised if, and I don't know which courthouse you deal with. I'm just suggesting that maybe you might want to ask the county treasurer if that's possible.
That's very interesting because the county I live in, Lancaster, is a whole lot different. And there's no way that if I take a boat trailer title that I got from somebody, every time I go in there, something's wrong and they have to go to the back room for 10 minutes and stand and chit chat to come out and tell me that, oh, this T wasn't crossed properly.
Okay.
And I've heard that from many people, so I don't think I can do that because I asked them about that.
That's between you and your treasurer.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you for your testimony.
Thank you, Senator Brandt.
Are there any other questions
Questions?
from the committee? I don't see any. Thank you for your
I
testimony.
thank you for your time, and this is an important bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents to 728? Are there any who would like to testify in the neutral capacity? Senator McDonald, you are welcome to close.
Unless you have questions, I'll wait.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any questions, just so I don't cut him off too quickly? Now, I do have 4 letters in opposition. No, oh, I transposed the letters. I'm sorry, that was for another bill. Here, I think I'm on it at 782, so legitimately. All right, I'm dyslexic, I suppose. That will close the hearing on 728, and we will go to 782.
Good afternoon, Chairman Geis, Vice Chairman Mosier, and members of the Transportation and Telecommunication Committee. I am Senator Barry DeKay, Barrydekay, representing District 40 in Northeast Nebraska, and here today to introduce LB 782. LB 782 amends Chapter 60 to improve the process and way Nebraska automobile repairs are completed. The reason I introduced LB 782 is because there are problems with how cars are repaired today. There are many instances when some car repair shops do not repair cars correctly. This has led to many cars in the secondary market that are unfit to be on the road. I believe consumers need additional protection in this instance. LB 782 would create a new definition known as structurally totaled. This definition would consist of vehicles deemed totaled due to a kink or crease in the frame rail, unibody, or structural component, including an engine cradle or rear differential. The car repair body shop facility repairing the vehicle and the insurance company that insured the vehicle can deem a late model vehicle structurally totaled if both determine the vehicle meets the condition. This process provides some flexibility for the two to come to a consensus. The vehicle would then get a salvage title via the insurance company. The salvage title would give consumers a better idea of the state and history of the used vehicle. The other two ways of designating a salvage vehicle, either through a voluntary declaration by the owner of the vehicle or a case where a late model vehicle has been damaged to the extent that the total cost of repair to its immediate pre-damage condition meets or exceeds 75% of the retail value of the vehicle prior to the damage remains the same. I do want to be clear, a structurally total vehicle does not include a vehicle deemed a total loss due to hail or cosmetic damage. It also does not include a vehicle if the cost to perform repairs does not exceed 75% of the actual cash value of the vehicle. Secondly, I want to make sure cars are repaired correctly. In today's society, newer cars are increasingly sophisticated computers, sensors, and other electronics, and it is crucial to make sure these cars are repaired correctly. That is why LB 782 dictates that cars must be repaired with how the manufacturer recommends cars to be repaired, with the exception of parts. One item of note for the committee, I do have an amendment, AM 116, impacting page 6, line 11. The amendment is changing the tool auto body repairs are following from estimated system to the original equipment manufacturer procedures. There will be proponents following me that can offer the importance of that change. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them for you.
Great, thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions from the committee? I do not see any. You're sticking around for closing?
Exactly. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any proponents for LB 782? Good afternoon.
Chairperson Geist, Vice Chair Moser, and members of the Transportation and Telecommunication Committee. I am Sarah Stallon, SarahStillahn. Thank you for your time and the opportunity to be in front of you to discuss an important issue facing Nebraska. I'm from Bumper to Bumper Body and Paint in Scottsbluff. I manage my family's body shop that was started in 1984, and I've been actively working in the industry for 12 years. Our repair center is one of the largest in Western Nebraska, and we currently employ 9 people. We consistently strive to educate ourselves to provide safe and factory-recommended repairs. In Western Nebraska, we see a growing concern of vehicles coming into our shop with previously salvaged titles. Most of these vehicles have been cosmetically repaired to be marketable at a low budget, making these vehicles very appealing in the current market and economic conditions we are facing. Consumers are misled that these salvaged vehicles are repaired properly and are safe to drive, but more often this is not the case. It will shock you how easy it is to cover up major structural damage and disregard or leave off safety features that are designed to save lives and prevent accidents. There are far too many people or businesses that take shortcuts or try to cover up major issues to save a dollar or make quick money and take advantage of unassuming consumers. Coincidentally, as I prepared to come testify this week, a customer came in that recently purchased a late model vehicle from a local dealer. She wanted us to repair a cracked bumper. She had a list of other concerns she felt might be related. Headlight flickering, taillight doesn't come on, radio no longer works, tires going flat. My experience told me these items likely were not related, and I proceeded to open the hood and immediately saw severe prior damage. I saw a new headlight that was installed, of which the tabs were intentionally broken in order to fit due to the prior damage. Diving deeper, I saw wiring repairs completed only using electrical tape, cross-threaded bolts holding the engine cradle, and several other safety concerns. It's frustrating to know someone was willing to cut corners and make something work to make a sale. When repairs like these are made and not brought up to the standards the original manufacturer intended, it compromises the safety features and possibly the lives of people driving these hacked vehicles. I'm currently in possession of a Honda Civic that has significant structural damage to a quarter panel. To do factory repairs to this car will total. After I submitted my plan of roughly $14,000 to the insurance company, they responded by shaving off $4,000 in needed repairs and deemed it repairable. After further discussion, the insurance company decided to settle on the value of the car with the customer, but would not adjust their written estimate of the repairs. They artificially reduced the repair cost to allow the vehicle to be sold at an auction with a clean title. It increases the salvage value and is more appealing to the buyers. It not only won't have a salvage title, but it has structural damage. These insurance auto auctions used to sell these vehicles are even available to the public. A quick online search of Copart clean title cars brings up Copart's website touting, and I quote, "Copart has a growing inventory of clean title vehicles available in online auction. Register and start bidding." I decided to check this inventory, and one of the first vehicles I found is Exhibit A that you guys have. This is a screenshot of the exact listing. I think even those not in the industry can agree this vehicle has structural damage. However, it is being sold with a clean title. Many of these vehicles are sold online, and the only inspection is utilizing auction photos. Unsuspecting consumers are purchasing these from the auction and have a false assumption of a repairable car. Over the years,
You still have a minute.
Over the years of seeing these issues, I can't help but notice that every other industry has rules and regulations to prevent catastrophic accidents. My husband is a pilot, and his plane has been checked yearly with a fine-tooth comb in order to be airworthy. There are huge consequences to fly a plane that doesn't fall under the FAA standards for flying, and for obvious reason. It helps prevent planes from crashing or causing other incidents and property damage. We ask you that you would consider doing similar to the vehicle on the road. We need legislation to guarantee repair facilities insurance companies follow factory repair procedures to satisfy safety standards. And beyond this, we need to stop structural total loss vehicles from being on the road and brand these titles for parts only. I ask that you take a serious look at our bill. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions from the committee? Yes, Senator Brandt.
Thank you, Chairman Geis. Thank you, is it Stallone? Stallone, for appearing today. I think your testimony kind of clarifies this for me, having had vehicles totaled in the past. So what you're asking for today in Nebraska, we have just a salvage title.
Yes.
And is a salvage a 100% loss? Who determines the salvage title?
The insurance company determines a salvage title. So they determine a salvage title based off of the repair cost plus salvage is going to equal actual cash value of the car.
Okay.
If you can alter any one of those numbers, sometimes you can affect whether or not that vehicle becomes repairable. Even if they settle with the consumer and the customer gets the car replaced, the vehicle will still go to auction but may not have a branded title.
Right, and that's what happened here. Nebraska is a salvage title. You see these truckloads of these vehicles go up and down the road every day to somewhere. So what you're asking for is a new category called structurally totaled.
Yes.
And that would appear on the title of these vehicles. as structurally totaled, and they would have to be a minimum of 75% of that previous formula. Is that
Yes,
correct?
yes.
But is that 75% determined? I mean, if you're an insurance company, why don't they game it back to 74%? You're still going to see this, won't you? I mean,
Yes, and that's why we need to add the repair procedures, following OEM recommended repair procedures. It's going to prevent them artificially adjusting those numbers to get clean titles.
But if you use OEM parts, are going to make it more expensive to repair than new aftermarket parts.
Our bill isn't talking about parts. We're talking about how we want to handle installation of the parts and the repairs. It's the procedures, not the parts.
Okay. Well, I think it's a little clearer on what your perspective is on this. So thank you.
Questions from other committee members? I have one, I guess. I listened to Senator DeKay talking about changes in the definitions in the law, but I was having a little trouble figuring out how that changes the situation you're describing. So in a nutshell, what's the purpose of the bill and how does it address what you're concerned about?
I'm sure some others are going to go into that a little bit more, but we're removing the estimating database for being the basis of the repair cost. We need it to be OEM repair procedures, and that's going to allow it to be more of a correct description of the repair damages.
So a repair shop couldn't repair something in a field expedient manner, so to speak. Change the mounting of a panel or change the mounting of a engine.
Right. They want to do it in the way that the factory wants us to do that repair rather than just how we feel like it.
Well, they could do that, but then it would be salvage? Or would that affect whether it's a salvage title or not?
Maybe somebody can expand a little bit better on how exactly that would work. You know, we're not wanting to use the estimating database to dictate how those repairs are done because it's simply just a tool for cost. It's not a tool for repairs.
Okay. Well, thank you. Other questions? Oh, I'm sorry, Senator Grant.
Follow-up question. Using this truck, and it's obviously junked out, but so the insurance company or whoever, they're selling this truck with a clean title. If this was the same truck with a salvage title, the exact same thing, what's the price difference between what they're selling here is a clean title, right?
Yes.
The truck is junk, but they're selling a clean title versus if this thing now had a salvage title, what is that worth? What's the price of that clean title worth on a total vehicle?
You know, I don't have that actual data. We might be able to come up with some of that information for you, though.
What does your gut tell you?
20%?
All right.
You know, it depends on how severely damaged it appears.
But I mean, that's really what we're talking about. This is the issue we're talking about
Yes.
today in Nebraska. It's the version of a clean title, right?
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Okay, other questions from the committee? Thank you very much for your testimony. Okay, we're still on supporters, right? Anybody else want to speak in support of this bill? If you plan to testify, if you could move to the front row to be a little closer, that would be great. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Geis and members of the Transportation and Telecommunications Committee. I am Ryan Clark, RYANCLARK. I'm currently the Vice Chair for the Nebraska Auto Body Association and work as the Eastern Regional Manager for Eustis Body Shop. We have 6 locations across the state, and I am based out of our Lincoln location. First part of the bill addresses the need for designated total loss vehicles with a structural damage as such. Just like Sarah, we recently had a customer, as in this week, and our shopper came in for a routine repair, just a front bumper replacement. After we took the front bumper off, we found severe damage to the frame rail and other parts of the vehicle. I do have a link to that site, just as she did. I just don't have it with me. The customer sold the vehicle with a clean title from an internet car lot out of Omaha. He was completely blindsided by this damage. Now, we as repairers will assume the liability if this is not fixed correctly and do what just the vehicle came in for, a bumper replacement. If he were to get in another accident, the frame rail will not react in the manner that Honda intended and could impact the safety of the passengers. This is a clean title vehicle, came in for a $2,000 repair and needs over $10,000 in additional repairs. Had this bill been in place, the customer would not have been risking his and his passengers' lives by driving around a structurally damaged vehicle unknowingly. This customer is now stuck between a rock and a hard place. He doesn't have the money to get the vehicle fixed properly right now, but he doesn't want to burn anyone else on it either. Is it on the consumer to know that they need to take the bumper off to see the frame rail damage on this Honda? Or can we have a system in place that prevents this type of behavior in the future? Vehicles today are equipped with more safety features than ever before. Some many advanced driver assist systems include adaptive cruise control, lane departure, blind spot monitors, and many others. Some manufacturers do not allow you to repair over the area where the sensor is mounted. Some do. Some metals in the vehicle can be repaired, others require replacement. We are often asked by bill payers, why is this required? Why are other shops in the area don't ask for that, or we don't pay for that? The problem is the vehicles are changing. There's more traffic now than 20 years ago. Speed limits have increased. Vehicles are becoming safer to drive, but if a vehicle is in an accident, don't we want the vehicle to react in the same manner if it were to happen again? Shouldn't repairs bring the vehicle back to pre-accident condition? This requires different repair methods than we had even 5 years ago. We now have to calibrate sensors post-collision, inspect many more safety components, and follow specific parameters of how the vehicle metals can be repaired. Every manufacturer has in-depth testing and engineering on how vehicles should be built, repaired, serviced, and very few of them are the same. It is vital to consumer safety that we follow the procedures set forth by the OEM, not how we used to do it. For instance, the most common estimating platform in our industry is the CCC, gave sectioning guidelines for a 2018 Chevy Traverse along a roof rail section. This is a common vehicle in our marketplace. However, GM does not approve the sectioning operation in their repair procedures. Bill payers often want to pay what the estimating guidelines pay, not what the manufacturer approves as the proper repair. This is why there should be a requirement to follow each manufacturer's guidelines. The opposition will likely touch how this will increase the severity of claims. Anyone who asserts that the cost of repairs will increase if the shops are following the documented repair procedure instructions from the manufacturers and developed by the engineers who designed the vehicle is admitting that these procedures are not currently being followed. Otherwise, the cost of repairs and the cost to insure would not increase. If they aren't being followed today, and both sides of the issue agree on that, then the consumers in Nebraska are being endangered. Our opponents will state that we have monopolistic motives. I want to point out that this bill states the exclusion of OEM parts. Interestingly, these organizations that submitted opposition letters support the Repair Act federally because they believe automakers should be required to give consumers the critical information, software, and tools they need to fix their vehicles. In the context of a repair, these OEM repair procedures are the most critical pieces of information that all of these organizations say should be available to everyone. Yet here they are objecting and being followed. This issue is not introduced to address parts. It's about ensuring that vehicles should be totaled are totaled, and structurally totaled for parts only. And the vehicles that should be fixed are fixed safely, following proper processes. Thank you for your time. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions? Yes, Senator Brandt.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Geist. Thank you, Mr. Clark, for testifying. It kind of bothers me that you're the second testifier to bring up somebody bought a car that probably went through a flood or something in another state, probably got the title washed somewhere, came to Nebraska. Does Nebraska, from a consumer protection standpoint, do we have any lemon laws in Nebraska so that when that individual buys a car from a dealer and then they find out they've been had, do we have any lemon laws on the automobile side, or they just have to take a civil action in court?
To my knowledge, I do not know. My gut says no, but we do have another proponent that works at a dealership who might be able to help you.
Okay, and then I found it sort of interesting that you brought up right to repair.
Yes.
Okay, so bear with me. But it shouldn't make any difference if a individual chooses to repair the vehicle themselves or a body shop does. Should it, if they're using new parts?
If they're following the correct procedures, no, it shouldn't.
All right, thank you.
Are there any other questions on the committee? I don't see any. Thank you for your testimony. Any other proponents?
Chairperson Geis, and members of the Transportation and Telecommunication Committee. My name is Doug Keller, spelled Dougkeller. I'm the president of Eustis Body Shop. I started my business in Eustis, Nebraska in 1979. Eustis Body Shop is now in six communities in Nebraska: Eustis, Cozad, Lexington, Kearney, Grand Island, and Lincoln. Our company has over 75 employees, and we are factory certified in many of the vehicle brands. Our employees participate in annual training in all aspects of collision repair and are all ICAR Gold class. We approximately repair 4,000 crashes a year in our facilities. When I started my business, the most advanced safety feature in the cars of the 70s were shoulder harness seatbelts. In the 80s, we started to see anti-lock brakes, lighter vehicle construction. During the 90s, airbags were introduced with federal standards going into place in 1998. In the 2000s, automatic braking systems became more commonplace. From there, the floodgates of technology have opened with blind spot, forward collision warning, lane keeping, lane departure, pedestrian detection, adaptive cruise control, parking sensors, auto parking, rear view backing, and night vision cameras. In 2016, the U.S. government released guidelines for self-driving cars. Today's vehicles have more sensors and computer systems than the space shuttle. As you can imagine, the procedures to repair vehicles have changed dramatically. In the 70s, the worst of the poor quality repairs that we would see coming into our shops from other repairers were bent frames. That might result in an alignment problem or poor fitting of bumper or misaligned sheet metal. Rarely was there a life-threatening improper repair. As vehicles advanced and safety standards were increased, the more complicated the car became. Now, structural integrity in repairs is critical for the safety of all of us that are on the road. Federal rollover standards include windshield and back glass as part of the rollover strength of a vehicle and must be installed properly with factory recommended urethane sealer and processes. There have been many documented cases of fatalities due to not installing glass properly. Several years ago, two young men from Eustis were driving home from the county fair. They hit a cow and were thrown from the front windshield, and they both died from their injuries. Further investigation found that the windshield was not installed properly and failed to keep the occupants in the vehicle. Windshields are just a small part of the repairs we do in our shops, and you can see the importance of following factory procedures. Rebuilt salvaged vehicles are a problem. I have personally witnessed many vehicles coming into our shop for minor repairs and discovering that there are major structural issues. Not too long ago, a vehicle came into our shop for repairs. It had a salvage title, and the rebuilder did not replace the airbags that were deployed. The vehicle owner had no idea and had to pay several $1,000s out of pocket to make his vehicle safe again. Please give our bill serious consideration. There must be legislation to ensure that insurance companies, as well as repairers, follow factory procedures. There must be strong legislation directing insurance companies to brand the car's title for parts only in the case of a structural total loss. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there questions from the committee? Yes, Senator Moser.
So this bill would make it illegal to use parts that weren't original equipment parts?
No, it doesn't have anything to do with parts. It just has to do with procedures, factory procedures.
But if you're doing a repair for a customer, the company that's doing the repair has to use the right procedures?
Right.
What if they're doing their own car repair?
Well, they should follow procedures, but I don't know. I can't control that.
And you're not allowing the use of salvage vehicle to allow you to use different procedures. You don't want to use any procedures other than the ones that are approved?
Well, I think the salvage, if the car is for parts only, that would put that car in a salvage yard and we would buy used parts. It would increase the amount of used parts available to us. Did I answer that?
Well, yes, I think you answered my question, but I might not have asked the right question. So, is there an advantage to the insurance company if they declare a car as a salvage car? Why do they put salvage? Is that a law that we have to put salvage on the title if it's 75% of the value?
Yes.
Okay. Because that doesn't help the value of it.
Right, it does not.
Is there you have a different answer for Senator Brandt's question about the difference between a clean title and a salvage title?
I would say it's more than 20%. I'd say it'd be half.
Yeah, I don't know either. I was shopping for a car and it had a salvage title and I was buying it from a rebuilder.
Mhm.
He buys cars that are all
right
mushed in and then resells them. And I think he's reputable, but he said 25% at least, less value with a salvage title.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Senator Brandt.
Thank you, Chairman. Guys, a real quick question. Your goal is just to get all structurally totaled and salvaged vehicles off the road and in a junkyard so that they can't be rebuilt and put back on the road. Would that be a correct statement?
Structural total loss, not a cosmetic total loss.
But the bill doesn't define the difference, does it?
Yeah,
I think it does.
There's a
Okay.
definition.
Okay,
Yeah.
fair enough.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you very much.
Yes, Senator DeBoer.
Okay, so let me see if I got this. The concern is that we have cars or trucks that have been so structurally damaged that they really cannot be made safe again. Is that the concern?
That's kind of why they're totaled. And,
Okay. And so if we had some sort of, maybe it's a special title, like maybe you said that it's a salvaged, unfixable, whatever the name of
like
the
the parts only.
Yeah, for parts only, sure.
Okay.
And we had that category, then do we need to is there another thing that we're also not getting at? Because I understand that piece, that those are only for parts. We can
Right.
only take the parts. We don't want those back on the road. Is there any other problem that we're trying to solve with this bill?
Yes.
Okay.
We want to have the insurance companies as well as the repairers follow factory procedures. There's two parts in the bill.
So really, the one is this exhibit.
Mhm.
That's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
And the other is you want them to follow factory
procedures
procedures.
to repair cars that are repairable.
And will that make some folks unable to, will some repair shops be unable to comply with that level of factory procedure fixing because maybe of some of these? I just got a new car last week. It has adaptive cruise control. I'm still trying to get used to it. And some of those things maybe are more difficult to repair than, something that requires a wrench.
They would either have to just turn those jobs down and send them to someone that could do them, or else they'd have to get up to speed and be able to do them.
So this is not as dissimilar from the right to repair bill as I thought. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Chairperson Geis and members of the Transportation and Telecommunications Committee. I am James Rodis, James Rodis. I am the Process, Procedure, and Training Manager for Woodhouse Auto Family and OEM Calibration. I come to you with 35 years' experience as a past Vice Chair for the Nebraska Auto Body Association and active member of the Society of Collision Repair Specialists. If you've heard from my colleagues, this bill is twofold. First is to follow the workshop manual. I can tell you before manufacturers change the design of vehicles, at the direction of the IIHS to make passenger vehicles more safe, this bill would not have mattered much. In the last 15 to 20 years, with vehicle design changes immensely and continues to change yearly, we used to be able to do almost anything to fix the car, but serious design changes means if we don't use exactly the right glue, the right number of welds in the exact spots, we could lead to catastrophic failures in the next accident. We currently have material compositions that even a nick means it must be replaced. The government prides itself on the crash test ratings. I'm led to believe some of the design changes are due to the higher rates of speed that we are allowed to travel. Those ratings are the reason people buy certain cars and trucks, to keep their husbands, wives, children, and grandchildren safe. I get calls weekly from friends and family members on this very question. As insurance companies have removed adjusters from the field and internet insurance companies have popped up, as insurance companies have removed adjusters from the field and internet insurance companies have popped up, having someone as educated as us talk about fixing the car is not the norm anymore. We simply have one side looking at numbers and the other side trying to fix the car for consumers and liability reasons. We are repeatedly told this repair is not conducive to the market or no one else is asking for this. For one, any reputable shop, which we have a ton across this state, and two, if the shop writes a repair bill to fix the car correctly per the manufacturer, it needs to be granted. This simply is not a numbers game. It's to keep severity down. It's to save lives. The second part of the bill is the total loss section. Over the last 10 years or so, we've been seeing more and more businesses pop up that their business model is to purchase vehicles from insurance auctions and to repair and resell them, a lot of times to unsuspecting consumers. I just had one 2 weeks ago that had wood screws, baling wire, and were used on the front end of a car attached to the headlight and a bumper along with fabricated brackets. Luckily, this repair wouldn't kill anybody, but the customer had no idea, and the repair bill was north of $3,500. $3,500 the insurance won't cover as it wasn't in an accident. $3,500 the car lot does not owe because it was sold as is. Our calibration company sees these kinds of repairs daily, whether it's a frame rail that's wadded up or even worse, a frame rail that was heated up in order to try and straighten it. Thankfully, my guys are trained to look for such things, but the normal everyday consumer has no clue what to look for. They make sure the paint looks good, the body lines are straight. Thought they got a great deal because they paid $2,000 less than the dealership, the car lot, or the owner selling it out of the newspaper. These unsuspecting consumers have no knowledge that the airbags may not deploy at the correct time. Or worse, they could get trapped in their car if there's an accident because the vehicle is not going to react the same as it was intended to due to improper repair. Woodhouse currently represents 23 locations under its umbrella. Believe me when I say that a company this large, the financial impact when these vehicles are traded in, we simply refuse to sell them to consumers. I have enclosed a couple photos from the local insurance auction. It's just a couple of the vehicles we see on our roads that we will see on our roads soon. The problem with the red fire vehicle is the fire weakens all structure, all metal in the front end of this car. Not to mention the glue, along with the welds that help hold it together, has melted out. We know this because the paint and the glue have the same melting point of 300 degrees. The blue vehicle has serious frame damage that the manufacturer tells us we simply can't pull it out because it's kinked. This has to be replaced. We largely see these simply pulled out and covered up. I'm sure the opposition is going to hammer on the parts side of this, but clearly we did not include parts. We actually excluded them. In closing, we humbly ask you that you help us in our fight to keep our families, neighbors, friends, customers, and your constituents safe on the roadways. Thank you for your time, and I'll answer any questions from the committee.
Are there any questions on the committee? Yes, Senator Boston.
Thank you, Chair. How many other states have this been introduced in and have they been passed?
I could get that information for you. I can tell you that there was an article posted by the SCRS, Society of Collision Repair Specialists, in 2019 that they talked to Department of Insurance in every state, and over half of them stated that they assume that this is how cars are getting repaired.
So when it talk about that you have to be able to repair, I think this goes kind of what Senator DeBoer was asking earlier. In order to repair a vehicle, you have to be able to be certified, I would say, in order to work on that vehicle. So does that then eliminate certain people, businesses in the state that may not be certified?
You would not have to be certified. The only thing you would have to do is get access to the repair procedures, which a daily pass is generally $25 to $35, which you could then pass on to the insurance company. You know, here's my bill for this. And then at that point, it's simply going in and seeing what you have to repair. If you're welding on a quarter panel, you pull the procedures for the quarter panel. Where are we going to weld it at? How many welds? What kind of welds do we have? What kind of glue do we have to use? That all matters when this car is put together. It's not, you know, we're going to throw 8 welds on here and call it good. We have to follow their procedure. There's multiple different kinds of glues out there. Each glue dries at a different rate. The slower a glue dries, the stronger it is. They tell you which glue we have to use because that's how it was done at the factory. That's how we know it's going to react the same.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Senator Motion.
So this bill would eliminate a rebuilder from buying the back half of a car that's in good shape and the front half of a different car that's in good shape and cutting them somewhere and welding them back together.
100%, because that'll kill people. Today's cars, that will kill somebody.
And what about custom cars like limousine builders and stuff? They cut cars apart and weld a section in the middle. Would this
100%.
eliminate their business?
Would not eliminate it.
Do the car manufacturers have procedures how to make a limousine out of a
They
Lincoln
have
Continental?
upfitter sections, yes. So even like lifted vehicles, there's a special section you have to go to for that. That kind of tells you how you can do that and change what was done at the factory. They don't always agree with it. You know, they tell you, well, don't lift the car over 6 inches, but they do have a section that does describe that in the workshop manuals. A little harder to find, but you can find it.
This would cost insurance companies a lot of money if they had to fix cars using original parts and in certain ways.
We're not asking for original parts. We're asking, let us just follow exactly how the manufacturer wanted these fixed, excluding parts.
So you can use generic parts, but you
Correct.
have to follow the repair manual.
Correct. That's all we're asking for here. We just want to fix cars right.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, Senator DeBoer.
Thank you, Senator.
Got
Bosselman's
some-
very popular
Yes, he
today.
is.
We were all
In my
getting
head.
called Bosselman. So if you're looking at the factory procedure manuals, do they require you to use factory parts? Because if they require to use factory parts, then even though you may not intend that the bill require factory parts, if the manuals say you have to use factory parts and you say you have to use the manuals, the transitive property says you've got to use factory parts.
They all have statements that say you have to use factory part. Every manufacturer
So
does.
then,
But that's the reason we're excluding it. We're saying we're good with not having the part without that. We're saying we just want to be able to repair it the way that they state. And that's why we excluded the parts, because we knew that was going to be the fight.
but my point is that if you say you must use what the factory manual says, and the factory manual says, in order to do this properly, you must use our part, then we're sort of running in circles here where we end up with, you have to, the bottom line is you end up having to use the parts.
I don't disagree with you, but we have to start somewhere. We have to protect our consumers somewhere.
Okay.
I mean, there's got to be a starting point somewhere. That's the easiest thing we can do is say, hey, we will exclude parts from this. Just allow us to weld them where we need to wear them, section them the way that they need to be sectioned so we can do this right. Aftermarket companies, they don't sell quarter panels, which is structure. They sell fenders. You don't find doors in aftermarket companies. You find bumpers. Those are small pieces to the puzzle.
Okay, this is way outside of my wheelhouse. But let me see if I followed that. There are some things that in the factory factory procedures manual will say you can't fix a certain thing. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. There's structure pieces. So what kind of car do you drive?
Chevy Equinox.
Okay, so when you open up your Chevy Equinox, you see the door jamb. right?
Yeah.
Right behind that door jamb is structure. That outside
Yeah.
piece you see is not structure. The piece inside is.
Yeah.
If we put a nick in that piece of structure, when we take it apart, we have to replace it because it is weak in the metal. That is super high strength metal.
Yeah,
The minute we nick it, we change it.
that makes sense to me. So when you're saying that in the factory manuals, they have these procedures, essentially what you're trying to do is say that means that some things cannot be repaired.
100%.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Senator Frederickson.
Thank you, Chair, guys. I'm trying to make sense of this part. I'm not trying to belabor the point, but so if the bill is saying you have to follow the manufacturer's guidelines, and you're saying, but that excludes the parts, help me understand how those two things coexist. If the manufacturer's guideline is requiring the parts.
We already have those guidelines that are our side we really have to follow, but a consumer signs a insurance policy that says they haven't read it, but it says, hey, we're okay to use aftermarket parts. So our hands are tied there, right? They're gonna get aftermarket parts, that's how it is. All we wanna do is follow, in this situation, the part is kinked. We can't repair a kinked part.
Right.
They're saying, manufacturer tells us we can't. We know from litigation that our work has to be in a workmanlike manner. When you go to court over this, workmanlike manner relates back to following the OEM manual. If we don't do that, we're gonna lose in court. There's tons of cases where this has already been proved across the country. We just haven't had a big one here in Nebraska. There was one 5 years ago in Texas, $42.5 million. A dealership my size lost the lawsuit because they did not follow the workshop manual.
Right, right.
We want to protect our shops. And again, the two people were trapped in that car had 3rd and 4th degree burns. I've actually met them, great people. They're in pain every single day. We don't want that for any of our shops to go through something like that, or our customers to have to go through it. We just want to fix cars right.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? I don't believe so. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Additional proponents? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chair Geis and members of the committee. My name is Nick Steingart, Nicksteingart, and I am the Director of State Affairs at the Alliance for Automotive Innovation, a trade association that represents the manufacturers that produce nearly every new vehicle sold in the United States. Our membership includes battery manufacturers, semiconductor makers, and suppliers up and down the supply chain. And appreciate Senator DeKay sponsoring this bill and recognizing this is a serious public policy issue and taking steps to address it. As you can tell, I am here today to speak in support of this bill and the amendment. As has been mentioned by some of the previous presenters, today's vehicles are considerably more advanced than vehicles of even just a couple years ago. Everything from automatic lane centering, blind spot detection, adaptive cruise control, pedestrian detection systems. These systems that we refer to as automated driver assistance systems, or ADAS, these systems come equipped and even standard on many new vehicles sold today. In order to fix these vehicles, you need to have the proper repair procedures, and accordingly, automakers have developed and published specific procedures to guide the post-collision repair of every new car they sell each year, detailing the proper way to return a vehicle to a safe roadway condition. And that's a process, I might add, that takes thousands of hours per vehicle. Just so nobody thinks that this is an issue of access to manufacturers' procedures, there are many ways to access OE repair recommendations, including OEM One Stop, which is a webpage that allows auto body shops a single point of access to access repair procedures from almost every manufacturer. No other group or company provides anything close to vehicle-specific guidelines on how to appropriately conduct vehicle post-collision repairs. Under the current system, collision shops are forced to decide between making a proper repair and receiving proper payment for their work from the insurance companies, which is simply not right. Most consumers, and rightfully so, would expect OEM repair procedures are already being followed on their vehicles in absence of any law that would require as such. To steer a collision repair to follow any repair procedure other than the one produced by a vehicle's manufacturer is a disservice not only to the owner of that vehicle, but passengers who unknowingly may get in that vehicle and fellow motorists. In fact, there are not any other procedures to follow. Either you're following the practices of the manufacturer or you're not following any approved repair plan at all. The reality is the average consumer does not have the expertise or ability to monitor and approve the post-collision repairs conducted on the advanced automobiles of today. And for that reason, we applaud and thank Senator DeKay for proposing this safety-focused, pro-consumer approach to better quality repairs for all Nebraskans. And again, would urge you at the appropriate time to pass this bill with AM 116. That concludes my testimony. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Yes, Senator Bostelman has a question.
Thank you, Chairman Geis. As I sat there and listened to testimony, I've worked on a lot of title issues over the years we've been here. And one thing always struck out this committee has had, and I've had bills myself, is that the number one thing in order to title register a vehicle in the state of Nebraska, you have to meet safety standards. And if you do not meet safety standards, you cannot title register that vehicle in the state of Nebraska. So what I'm hearing is these vehicles do not meet safety standards. And if they don't meet safety standards, then why is this a issue, more of a legal issue than it is a repair issue? Because those vehicles, if they don't meet those safety standards, should not be licensed, should not have a title, and should not have that. So to me, I guess I'm coming to a point of this is maybe not a repair issue, it's more of a titling issue in the sense that these vehicles that have been, there needs to be some action taken against the companies or those who have titled those vehicles, period.
Yeah, I think that's probably a determination for the committee and sponsor to make, but as the previous witness testified, this really originated out of a case in Texas where you had a shop that was getting pressured, which came out during deposition from an insurance company to cut corners, not follow the OEM repair procedures, and that shop was found to be 75% liable for those horrific third-degree burns that those individuals suffered. So
that's exactly what I'm talking about, is that there is a remedy to this, and there's those who do not repair them according to the safety standards can be held liable.
Yeah, I don't know if we want to be in the, where this issue again originates from is these repairers want to fix the cars properly. They have to negotiate with the insurance companies and they control the purse strings here, and they get a lot of the pressure to
I hear
keep
what you're
those costs
saying,
down.
and the insurance companies will come and testify, I'm sure, but again, I'm gonna come back to, if that vehicle is not roadworthy and not safe to be on the roads, then that should come back to whoever's titling that vehicle. If it's an insurance company or if it's a repair place that did not repair it back to the safety standards, then there's gotta be some responsibility there. I mean, I don't know that this, you're still gonna have people who go out there do it. I think, what about rat rods? What about Model A that gets changed, that someone rebuilds it? What about the farm truck that you have that you wanna, you run into something, you knock in the front end of it, but you know what, it still works on the farm, you still do it on the farm. I mean, I guess what you're saying is that there's already been case law out there, there's always been liability found. So maybe that's a place we should be rather than putting up, if the repair firms already know, repair shop already knows that potentially it comes back on me, right? As a repair shop, if I don't fix that vehicle right to back to roadworthiness and safety standards for the road, it comes back on me. And if it's an insurance company, then it comes back on the insurance company. Maybe those type of cases need to happen more often, and we can resolve the issue we're talking about.
I see what you're saying. I don't want to lose sight of the fact that we're talking about safety here. And I get a little, wary or uncomfortable if we're saying, let's just wait for accidents to happen and then sort it out in the courts later.
I'm not saying that wait for an accident to happen. There should be an inspection on that vehicle. And the state should inspect that vehicle. Someone should inspect that vehicle. If the insurance company is going to say this vehicle is roadworthy and safe, and there's inspection safe, and if it's not, then it should come back on them.
Yeah, and I'm frankly not familiar with the inspection process here. It's possible that could be, revisited.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions? I don't see any. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other proponents? Proponents? Proponents. But you're ready for the next announcement. Why don't you go ahead? Opponents. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Geist and members of the Transportation and Telecommunications Committee. My name is Robert M. Bell. Last name is spelled B-E-L-L. I am the Executive Director and Registered Lobbyist for the Nebraska Insurance Federation. I'm here today to testify in opposition to LB 782. As a refresher, the Nebraska Insurance Federation is a state trade association of insurance companies. The Federation currently has over 40 member insurance companies. Members of the Federation include companies who write all lines of insurance and who provide over 16,000 jobs to the Nebraska economy and over $14 billion of economic impact to the state on an annual basis. Perhaps most importantly, the Nebraska Insurance Federation member companies provide high-value, quality insurance products that protect Nebraskans during difficult times. As you've heard already, maybe not, but LB 782 has two parts. First is a designation of a structurally totaled vehicle in the salvage title statutes for vehicles that have a kink or crease in certain structural components. I wasn't going to go too much into that in my testimony, but listening to the proponents, I did want to mention just a few things. There's certainly sometimes that structural components can be repaired for less than 75% of the value of the vehicle. And from my member companies, from what they tell me, that does happen occasionally, and they can repair that. And I'm going to admit, I am by no means an expert on salvage title. I'm not actually sure the legislation does what the proponents think it does related to the salvage title. And I think that would take more evaluation and discussion on that particular piece. The second part of the legislation is the last three sections of the bill. And that legislation places requirements on auto repair facilities to utilize original equipment manufacturer, OEM procedures for all repairs to motor vehicles, except for the use of OEM parts as it's amended. We are a little bit confused by this language, but when we reviewed the legislation, the insurance companies in Nebraska determined that LB 782 is an attempt by certain auto body shops to require the use of OEM parts in motor vehicle repair. And I wanted to provide a little background. OEM parts dominated the auto repair marketplace until about 40 years ago, when non-OEM parts began to be manufactured and sold. These typically are called aftermarket parts. Aftermarket parts are generally sheet metal and plastic parts for the exterior of the vehicle. The introduction of aftermarket parts into the market broke the monopolies of the OEM parts manufacturer. Aftermarket parts save Nebraska policyholders money. Premiums are lower when insurers and their policyholders are able to have a body shop use aftermarket parts. Not all insurers require the use of aftermarket parts. Many policies have provision for OEM parts for newer vehicles, and some riders are available for OEM parts on some policies. However, there's also definitely a market for cheaper insurance that requires, and that's probably not the word I should have used, cheaper, less expensive insurance that requires the use of aftermarket parts, unless the consumer decides to pay the difference for an OEM part, OEM repair versus an aftermarket repair. The question you might ask yourself, are OEM parts as good, or is aftermarket parts as good as OEM parts? In Nebraska, the answer is yes. And before you have a rule and regulation from the Department of Insurance that was promulgated in 1988 that requires aftermarket parts must be at least equal and like kind in quality to the original part in terms of fit, quality, and performance, which is Title 2110 of the Nebraska Administrative Code, Chapter 45. Under this rule, insurers must disclose to the claimant in writing on the estimate that this estimate has been prepared based on the use of automobile parts not made by the original manufacturer, parts used in the repair of your vehicle by other than the OEM are required to be at least equal and like kind in quality in terms of fit, quality, and performance to the original manufacturer parts they are replacing. I would also say that Congress has also seen the value of aftermarket parts. Federal law, specifically the Magnuson-Mott's Warranty Act, prohibits warrantors from voiding an automobile warranty merely because an aftermarket part has been utilized. And as of late as last year, the Federal Trade Commission has deemed manufacturers for placing prohibitions in their warranties. I think in particular, Harley Davidson was the company that was fined what's the latest fine, and they re-emphasized the consumer's right to repair. Sorry, I realize I'm out of time. We oppose 782, in case you couldn't tell. Thank you.
Thank you.
So,
Are there some questions for this testifier? Yes, Senator Brandt.
So in Nebraska, when we talk to the proponents here, and we have a vehicle here that's obviously totaled. I mean, it's totaled. There's no doubt about this. And it has a clean title because when the insurance company takes possession of the vehicle, you're going to resell it to, typically you resell it to a whoever, the highest bidder. Would that be the correct statement?
a lot of times that is how insurance companies do work. I assume it's not just the highest bidder, but the best bidder, right? So.
And the difference between the highest bidder and the best bidder is?
Well, it depends on the situation, right? We may have a business relationship with an auction, or we may not like doing business with somebody, and so we decide we're not going to take the highest bidder.
So I guess, you talked a lot about parts, but the other part of the bill is about this clean title on a obviously destroyed vehicle.
Right.
Are the insurance companies opposed to when the insurance company totals that vehicle? Of course, it's got to be salvage if you total the vehicle in Nebraska, doesn't it?
That's my understanding, yes.
All right, I'll wait for somebody else to come up. I've got to formulate my thought here for a minute, so thank you.
No problem.
Any other questions? I don't see any. Thank you for your testimony.
You're welcome.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Geist, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Corby Gilbertson. It's spelled Korby Gilbertson. I'm appearing today as a registered lobbyist on behalf of the American Property Casualty Insurance Association in opposition to LD 782. And I don't want to be repetitive, and so I'm going to just kind of jump to comments from Senator Bosselman and Senator Brandt. The replies I got to this legislation were literally, what are they trying to do with this? It doesn't make any sense. We can't figure out what this bill does. Friday, we got an amendment that kind of clarified it. And then the assumption was, okay, they're pretty much just bringing back the bill from last year. So, because it's still not clear what the bill intends to do. We did not spend time discussing the title issue because they weren't that concerned with that part of it. Because as you said, the safety issue is still there. Insurance companies don't want people out driving unsafe cars. I think that is, that we hear that all the time. Well, the insurance company didn't want to fix the car. We don't gain anything by having unsafe cars on the road. So I think we need to put that aside and talk more about what are we really trying to get at with this bill. And if we're really trying to get at figuring out how to do salvage titles on vehicles, then let's talk about doing that. There is no such thing as a parts-only title. I heard one of the proponents say that. That doesn't exist. So I'm confused. I don't know what the bill actually does. I think obviously if the issue is keeping unsafe cars off the road and figuring out how to title them as a salvage vehicle, then that's the conversation we should have. This bill, I don't think does that.
Are there any questions? I don't see any. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Chairperson Geist, members of the Transportation Telecommunications Committee. My name is Scott Merritt, spelled SCOTTMERRITT. I'm here today on behalf of the automotive recycling industry of Nebraska, ARIN. We are a trade association that represents the salvage yards and recyclers across the state, as our name says. And we have yards across the state. Many of them, almost all of them are locally owned, and many of them are still in the second, third generation of ownership in their family. We submitted some written testimony through the portal, so in the essence of time, I'm just going to jump to a couple of points. First, our association does not have a position on the structural salvage title issue part of this. It's two-edged. We'd like to see vehicles salvaged so my people can recycle them, but yet we also sell parts to other customers. The real problem that we have with the bill in opposition is Section 6 that's been referred to several times. And what is the intent? We found the language very, very ambiguous. And we're really, as some of the other folks have spoken to, really not sure where this heads. Is it about the process of repair? And if so, I've heard in here that it's not about parts, but the manuals that they're referring to and the information that they're referring to, I'm not a specialist in this area, but I have yet to see a manufacturer's manual that refers to please use recycled parts in the repair of this vehicle, whether it be from John Deere or GM or Ford. So we're really confused on the verbiage in there, and I think the amendment that was mentioned does not really clarify it for my members. And where does recycled parts fit into this whole scope of things? So on behalf of my membership, I would ask that we do not advance 782. If there's any questions, I'll try to answer.
Are there any questions? Yes, Senator Brandt.
Thank you, Chairman Geist. Thank you, Mr. Merritt, for your testimony today. Today on your salvage yards, when you get a vehicle like this that's totaled, gets pulled across the scale, they must provide a title. Is that correct?
Yes, and that title is either filed with the state or it's salvaged.
Right, but once, and obviously then the car is probably crushed or taken apart or something, but there's an obligation on the part of the salvage yard then to turn that title back into the state. Does that go to the DMV or who does that go to?
I believe it goes to the county first and ends up at the state, but I'd have to check that. I know it goes county.
And that's an effort to keep any shenanigans from going on down the road, correct?
Yeah, the title would be separate when the car is torn apart.
All right, thank you.
Any additional questions?
Oops, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you're good. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Geist and members of the committee. Good afternoon. My name is Catalina Jailbreja, spelled Pareja, and I represent LKQ Corporation. LKQ is a global leading provider of aftermarket, recycle, remanufacture, and specialty parts called alternative auto parts. LKQ is also a leading provider of motor vehicle diagnostic services, including pre and post scans, calibrations, reprogramming, and other mechanical services. LKQ has a global leading team of about 45,000 members. We operate in 1,600 locations in 25 countries, and we have 7 facilities here in Nebraska. LKQ is in opposition to LB 782 as originally introduced and recently amended. The bill creates inaccurate definitions and problematic provisions for the use of original equipment manufacturer procedures and parts. And I think we have to make a clear distinction between the two very different issues that we are discussing here today. We have Section 1 addressing the salvage total loss vehicle issues, and then we have the section of concern for most of the opponents found in Section 6, 7, and 8, dealing with OEM procedures and parts. The bill is model legislation supported by the car companies and body shop associations across the nation. In recent years, OEM repair procedures legislation attempting to restrict the use of alternative parts has been introduced in almost 20 states with no success. All of those legislatures have rejected this anti-competitive legislation, including Nebraska, when this proposal was presented to the Banking, Commerce, and Insurance Committee in 2021. LB 72's proposed definition for OEM parts fails to state the fact that car companies do not manufacture all of their own products. Manufacturers of OEM parts supply parts to the car companies as well as the aftermarket providers. These parts are often manufactured in the same facility, same assembly line, following identical specifications, but they're branded differently for the car companies and the aftermarket providers. LKQ is in strong opposition to the underlying premise to mandate repair procedures originated by the car companies, which by default require the exclusive use of their branded products. Such proposal would outright prohibit the use of alternative parts, including aftermarket, recycle, remanufacture, and specialty parts, as well as the tools and equipment that are needed to conduct diagnostic and repair services. LB 782 would establish a de facto restriction on the alternative industry, as it makes allusion to OEM repair procedures that are normally included in manuals, guidelines, service bulletins, specifications, and directives for motor vehicle repair that most certainly favor the use of only branded car company parts, tools, and equipment. Legislation should not mandate adherence to any position statements, recommendations, suggestions, advice, or guidance regarding the use of any particular brand, type, or manufacturer of parts, tools, or equipment. This proposal translates into a monopolistic government mandate that attempts to disrupt Nebraska's auto repair industry and will undeniably result in higher prices and limited choices. Nebraska consumers should have the right to choose how to repair their vehicles. Limited options, raising repair costs, and insurance premiums via government mandates will only hurt families in Nebraska that are already under economic frustration and depend on their vehicles to get to work the most. This is the wrong time to pass adverse legislation limiting repair options for Nebraska families. LB 782 would exacerbate the already stressful situation for families dealing with high fuel prices, inflation, and product back orders. Constituents would simply outcry the increase in repair and insurance expenses in addition to abnormally long wait times for servicing of their vehicles due to the controlling nature of this proposed language. Parts shortage and supply chain disruptions continue to affect new car production and parts availability. Alternative parts are readily available, and they're ready for Nebraska families to promptly repair their vehicles in a safe and affordable manner. Alternative parts are offered between 26 to 70% less than comparable OEM parts. We respectfully ask you to reject this proposal and allow Nebraska families to continue to repair their vehicles with safe, affordable, and readily available options.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions? I don't see any. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any additional opponents? Are there any neutral testimony? Is there any neutral testimony? Senator Takei, you are welcome to close.
Thank you again, Chairman Geis, Vice Chairman Mosier. I appreciate the discussion today from both sides of this issue. And I would like to reemphasize my amendment as amended. Section 7 says any person performing consumer care shall follow the original equipment manufacturer OEM procedures for all repairs to motor vehicles except for the original equipment manufacturer part. I will repeat that this bill does not dictate that the car be repaired using certain parts. It just means that the car must be repaired with the best practices to provide consumer care through manuals and guidance provided by the manufacturer. This amendment lays out that OEM procedures should be used to fix the vehicle, but allows room for the facility to use OEM parts, aftermarket, remanufactured, or refurbished parts if they so choose. I will emphasize, in the state of Nebraska, at least, you go through insurance, all insurance specified aftermarket parts must be at least a similar kind, quality to OEM parts to fit in quality and performance, which means the procedure should be followed to make the repairs necessary. It doesn't mean you necessarily have to use OEM parts. It just means that those parts, whether refurbished or aftermarket, must meet the standards of the manufacturer's suggested schedule for how they work with them. So it does, it's not to dictate for any parts, but to make sure that they are inspected to manufacturer specifications. So if you're going to use refurbished parts, all it means is that they need to meet the inspection. If they are properly dismantled for somebody to use, properly inspected, so your anti-lock brakes, your cruise control, all of those are taken apart, inspected, so they are safe when they are reintroduced to a different vehicle. That is what I'm looking for today, is to make it make it for the consumer that is doing this work, buying these vehicles. Insurance costs aside, there are options out there for insurance carriers on their vehicles to use, regardless if it's a newer vehicle, older vehicle. Sometimes it dictates how much coverage they have. So if they can buy remanufactured, refurbished, or aftermarket parts that will make those vehicles safe to be on the highway, that is what my intent is with this bill today. So I just wanted to make that clear to everybody here. I believe consumers have the right to expect that their vehicle will be properly repaired. In my view, a proper repair is performed pursuant to the original equipment manufacturer's OEM procedures and using OEM or OEM equivalent parts that are similar, like, and of quality. If members of the committee or those testifying have any thoughts on how to improve the bill, I would be happy to work with them to make make vehicles on the highway safer for everybody that's driving them and buying them. With that, I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there any questions? I don't see any. That will close the hearing, except for, spoiler alert, which I already announced. We have 4 letters of opposition that came in for LB 782, and that will end the hearing on this bill. We will now move to LB 688, and that will be our final bill for today.
Thank you, Senator Geist. My name is Steve Erdman. I represent District 47, that is 9 counties in the Panhandle, and the name is spelled Steverdman. I bring to you today 688, which is a bill to help with CDL training, and I have some prepared remarks, but before I get there, I'll just share with you the intent or why we are considering this. It's because the state of Iowa has done a similar thing to this, and they have contributed $6 million to a CDL driver training program in Iowa, and rightfully so. The concern is if we don't do something to keep our CDL drivers, our truck drivers in Nebraska, we may lose those over to Iowa. So that is the intent. The bill is to transfer $10 million one time to a fund to help with training for CDL drivers and also for diesel technicians. And the fiscal note very well stated what the intent of the bill is. The bill states to intent to appropriate $10 million from the general fund to the Nebraska Department of Motor Vehicles. The funds are to be used and utilized for work training programs designed to award grants to individuals to obtain commercial driver's license and diesel technology degrees or a certificate through an in-house or third-party certified training provider. The providers must be located in Nebraska and or be Nebraska community colleges, which I think is very important. And so the department, the DMV had a chance to take a look at the fiscal note and to give us their opinion about what this would cost. They stated that they don't have the expertise on staff to handle such grants. And as you'll see in the fiscal note, they're saying that to do that program, they need 4 full-time employees, and it's about $270,000 for that program. So it leaves about $9.7 million to be distributed for training. And so that is the intent of the bill. Truck drivers and diesel technologists are an essential part of Nebraska and the national workforce. We are short of truck drivers. That's one of the issues that we have in the state, and being in an agricultural district, that is a difficult thing for us at harvest time to find people who have CDL licenses to haul our products to the market. And so the CDL training will also help train diesel mechanics so that they can work on these trucks. The intention is up to $2,500 will be given to each one of those individuals seeking that training, and that will help offset the costs of getting certified in either one of those 2 classes. So you'll hear from the department. I would hope that they would be here and speak about that. There'll be others that will follow me to talk about what exactly this is going to do for the industry. The trucking industry is very important. I believe anything that you have today, a truck brought it. And if you don't have it, you're not going to get it if the truck doesn't bring it. And so when we've seen the diesel prices increase as they are and the shortage of truck drivers, you see some of the shelves in your grocery stores are vacant or empty because they couldn't get it transported there. There have been several emails I have received in support of this. I appreciate that. I went and looked at the Iowa proposal the other day. I think they have a very easy way to log into their site and check in how you find that resource. And I think we could do similar things here. So I'll make it very simple. I'm the last one today. I don't want to stand in between you and going home. Senator Wayne said to me yesterday, he said, "Erdman, I've never seen you bring a bill that asks for money. You're always trying to stop something." And so in the 6 years that I've been here up until now, I have submitted 2 bills for an appropriation, and this is one of them. And so I would appreciate your consideration on this. I'll try to answer any questions, but the technical questions can be answered by those following me.
Which is pretty funny. Senator Wayne and I think the same way, because I was going to say the same thing. So, but I don't need to. You've already stated it. Are there any questions on the committee?
Thank you.
Yes, Senator Brandt.
Thank you, Chairman Guys. Thank you, Senator Erdman, for bringing this bill. This is truly a bill that will help rural Nebraska. I guess the first question for you, why don't we just give the money to the community colleges that have the people in place to award the grants, as opposed to creating a grant program in our DMV, Nebraska DMV department? And I think we could save that $270,000 they're asking for. You know, that's another 100 scholarships, a little over 100 scholarships there at $2,500 each. And then the second question is typically truck driver training is like an 8 to 10 week course, but to become a diesel mech, you know, it's a 2-year course.
Correct.
You know, what were your thoughts on that?
Well, you know, Senator Brandt, I think those are great ideas, and it's worth flushing out and seeing if the community colleges can handle that. Why reinvent the wheel? So I think that's an idea that we need to consider and flush out to see if we can do that, because the community colleges have some of those people on staff to do those things, and whatever we can do to make it more efficient, I'm willing to do that.
All right.
However we can fix it.
Appreciate it.
You plan to stick around for closing?
Yeah, one thing I figured out, if I sit over there, I can hear.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any proponents for LB 688?
There are other proponents, but they pointed their finger at me
I
first.
noticed that.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Geist, members of the Transportation and Telecommunications Committee. For the record, my name is Jack Peets, Jackpeetz. I'm a registered lobbyist for the Nebraska Trucking Association. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to testify in support of Senator Erdman's LB 688. As background, excuse me, the Nebraska Trucking Association currently has more than 900 members, ranging from some of the North America's largest trucking fleets, single truck owner operators, construction companies, government agencies, healthcare systems. While our emphasis is mainly on the transportation industry, an important point to remember is any organization depending on trucks as part of its operation often needs our assistance and is in desperate need of more professional drivers. For these reasons, we stand in support of LB 688 and thank Senator Erdman for introducing this important and timely legislation. I would be remiss if I did not mention the great working relationship the association has with Director Rhonda Lamb. We have had the pleasure of interacting with the director on many issues. We appreciate her professionalism and her common sense approach and want to work closely with her on this legislation as it moves forward. We recognize the agency is going through a major update of its motor vehicle registration software package, which is needed and appreciated. Our concern is finding ways to solve Nebraska's shortage of new CDL holders. That pipeline is nearly empty. The NTA estimates on any given day there are between 4,000 and 6,800 jobs open for CDL holders that employers are struggling to fill. The problem is far worse on the national scale, where the shortage is expected to hit 150,000 in the next few years. We believe a program like the one proposed in LB 688 can make a difference. Less than a year ago, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration implemented the long-awaited entry-level driver training regulations, and on the chart you have, it's referred to as ELDT. With that, gone are the days when a person trained to drive trucks on the farm, the ranch, feedlot, truck service center, or other organization could simply go to the Department of Motor Vehicles, take the test, prove proficiency behind the wheel, and get their CDL. Up to 8,000 people a year would do so in Nebraska almost every year. Now, a CDL candidate must complete a minimum curriculum of theory training and meet training standards in behind-the-wheel instruction, both on a driving course and over the road, all provided by certified and federal registered training provider. And if any fees are exchanged, that provider must also go through a registration process with the state. Please refer to Figure 1 in your handout, which might help you understand just how far this problem reaches in many segments of the Nebraska economy. The NTA stepped up with a new program to help provide ELDT training, not for the sake of competing with the great community colleges or private driving school programs we currently have, but to simply try and fill the gap in the state's capacity. But we still need more. We believe LB 688 can lay the groundwork for a program that will spur on the development of more training opportunities. And it should be one that moves with the speed of business, unlike many other current funding programs. It could also help bring more people to the diesel technology profession. Another labor area in the state is where we're critically short of technicians. We illustrate the point in Figure 2 by pointing out 3 areas in which these funds could create many new training opportunities. Thank you for your time today and for your public service. I would be happy to answer any questions if I can answer those, but I would defer to the wise legal counsel you're lucky to have guiding you. Mike Hibble has quality experience in dealing with the trucking industry, and we greatly appreciate his experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Yes.
I knew there was one there.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Guys. Thank you, Mr. Peets, for your testimony. So you get a scholarship for CDL, you go through truck driver training. I've got my CDL license. What's to keep that operator in Nebraska? How do you know we aren't going to start training these guys and they're going to go over to Iowa because they're paying more? I mean, does there need to be a clause in the enabling legislation that says you have to serve a year in Nebraska or something of that nature?
Well, I think it's a pretty good question. I would defer to all of you on how you want to design the program or require the Department of Motor Vehicles to work with somebody and design the program. But I would tell you that if you look at that chart, and one of the things the Nebraska Trucking Association has done, they've gotten certified to do that entry-level training. So they do the classroom portion of it, and then they will, they make references to community colleges, they make referrals and references to trucking companies, different entities that actually can do the behind the wheel and on the road training. But if you look at that group on that chart, and the Nebraska Trucking Association has just entered into arrangement with several municipal entities, cities, and counties where they will provide for a fee, Nebraska Trucking will provide the training and then the theory training. And then they will kick those back to the particular entity, the municipality that can do the actual over-the-road training. But this is covering bus drivers. Like if you look at the program up in Omaha with OPS, shortage of bus drivers. This is a program that can help get those bus drivers trained. You get diesel mechanics that work in farm shops as well as truck shops, that when they fix your truck, they have to take that truck out on the road and road test it before they can certify that it's fixed and release it back to the customer. Those folks all have to have a CDL in order to be able to do that. This is a program that affects all of those people on the top of the chart. But the other thing is that if you look at some of the, a couple of the largest trucking companies you have that run over the road that do have drivers that come from other states or reside in other states, those trucking companies are based here and they license almost exclusively with the exception of maybe some small regional operations, 100% of their trucks here. So there's a huge volume of income that comes to the state by virtue of those tractors and trailers that they operate, being licensed in Nebraska. Now, the person behind the wheel may drive or come from another state, but the headquarters for those companies that pay taxes here as well as license their vehicles and trailers are based in Nebraska.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Senator Decay.
I'd just like to thank Mr. Peach for the expertise that he brings to our committee today and for his work on behalf of Nebraska truckers. So,
Thank you. I'm just kind of the spokesman, the guy. They got great staff and they have, Ken Grisham's their president, does a great job.
I would have one question for you.
Okay.
Who else is drawing straws today besides you?
Pardon?
Who else is drawing straws to testify today besides you? Thank you.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? I don't see any. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Geist and members of the Transportation and Telecommunications Committee. Thank you to Senator Erdman for bringing forward this bill. My name is John Waters. That's JOHNWATERS. I'm employed by Werner as in-house counsel. I encourage you to support this grant program in LB 688. In 1956, President Eisenhower signed the Highway Construction Act. The act aimed to build 41,000 miles of the interstate highway system. That same year, a young man from Boone County sold his family car. He used the proceeds to buy a gas-powered truck. Next, he built his own trailer for hauling, and he went to work. More than 65 years later, the Nebraska business founded by one driver with one truck has grown to nearly 10,000 professional drivers. Werner drivers travel highways across America and into Mexico and Canada too. Today, the company founded by C.L. Werner employs nearly 15,000 people, all from its global headquarters off Interstate 80, just south of Omaha. Like other industries, trucking faces challenges related to its workforce, specifically the shortage of licensed professional truck drivers and diesel techs is affecting the operations of Werner Enterprises and most other Nebraska trucking companies, large and small. In 2022, the American Trucking Associations reported an industry-wide driver shortage of more than 80,000 professional truck drivers, a trend they project could double by 2031. Less reported but also significant is the shortage of diesel techs. These experts inspect, repair, and overhaul our diesel engines. Both of these professions require a high school diploma or equivalent. They both require professional training too. This grant program will help address the shortages by providing those training opportunities to individuals seeking a CDL or certification in diesel technology. Specifically for your consideration, we have 3 recommendations. First, on the subject of CDL training, we recommend funding be made available to licensed training providers that are listed on the FMCSA's Training Provider Registry. This Training Provider Registry is a national database comprised of providers who give instruction to entry-level drivers. Second, on the subject of diesel tech training, we recommend funding opportunities be made available to in-house trainers, Nebraska-based employers, nonprofit organizations as well that partner with individuals and employers seeking training as diesel techs. Third and finally, we recommend the Nebraska DMV be responsible for administration of the grant program, but have the flexibility to contract out the grant program if that provides for greater efficiency and workload and cost. Moreover, we encourage this committee to provide for administrative costs incurred by the DMV and any contractor. In conclusion, Nebraska trucking is the lifeblood of our economy. Further, trucking is a pathway to opportunity for Nebraska drivers, diesel techs, and office associates. Werner Enterprises was founded by a driver, and our company continues to lead with the driver in mind. Thank you. I would be happy to answer your questions.
Any questions from the committee? Thank you for your testimony. Any other proponents?
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Geist and members of the committee. My name is Tim Keir, that is Timkeighger. I appear before you today in support of LB 688 on behalf of the Nebraska Petroleum Marketers and Convenience Store Association, as their members, as well as their associate members who are also in the pop, the beer, grocery supply industry. Want to thank Senator Erdman for bringing this bill. CDL drivers are probably one of my members' biggest problems in finding them. I agree with you, Senator Brandt, retaining them is difficult too, because my members spend some money training them and then they go to another employee, they stay in Nebraska. But one of the issues we have is hours of service. We're constantly looking for an hours of service waiver, which, I mean, there's safety concerns with that. But I think more importantly, it's you're burning people out. We're getting to the point where it doesn't matter how much you pay truck drivers anymore. If they're never home and they can't spend any time with their families, you know, it doesn't matter how much you pay them. So I think that any incentive to try and bring more drivers and train them into the industry is good for all of us, no matter what industry you're in. So with that, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions? I don't see any. Thank you. Any other proponents?
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Chairwoman Geist and members of the Transportation and Telecommunications Committee. My name is Andrew Dunkley, ANDREW, DUNKLEY. I'm with the Nebraska Farm Bureau. And nothing new that hasn't already been said on behalf of the Ag Leaders Working Group, which consists of the Nebraska Farm Bureau, cattlemen, corn growers, soybeans, pork producers, State Dairy Association, wheat growers, and Renewable Fuels Nebraska. We support Senator Erdman's LB 688. We thank the Senator for bringing it. Ag cannot operate without CDL drivers, and many, if not the large majority of agricultural producers are also hold a CDL. When the federal guidelines on CDL were passed about a decade ago, it was pretty restrictive on this industry, and we encouraged the passage of this. We believe that it would be a positive, and especially as we have young producers coming up wanting to get their CDL, this is an opportunity for them as well. And as the Senator mentioned in his opening, there are backups every single year during harvest for folks looking for qualified drivers, and they don't have it. So with that, I am open for any questions.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Any questions? I don't see any. Thank you. Any other proponents?
Hello.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Chair Geist and members of the Transportation and Telecommunications Committee, my name is Blair MacDonald, spelled BLAIR MacDonald, and I appear before you today as the registered lobbyist for the Nebraska Beverage Association in support of LB 688. The Nebraska Beverage Association has been representing the non-alcoholic beverage industry and local distributors of Coca-Cola, Pepsi, and Keurig Dr. Pepper Snapple in this state for over 40 years. My testimony today is also reflecting support from the Nebraska Grocery Industry Association. We're all very appreciative of Senator Erdman for introducing LB 688. So today I'm also speaking from the CDL employer's perspective, similar to Mr. Keir. Like many industries, our local bottlers have struggled to hire and fill openings for CDL drivers since before the COVID-19 pandemic. We saw many CDL drivers retire, and we're now experiencing a severe workforce shortage of CDL drivers. This was also complicated by the changes, as mentioned previously, by the Trucking Association of the implementation of the entry-level driving test last year, which an employee must complete before even starting a training course. So like many Nebraska businesses, our local bottlers are hugely reliant on truck drivers to deliver our products across the state. the beverage industry had to turn to creative solutions to hire CDL drivers. Both Lynn Pepco and Chesterman Company, Coca-Cola, and Lincoln have created their own in-house driving training program. So these companies are hiring potential drivers and training them in-house and incentivizing them to join the trucking industry. Our employers under the current system have become the training ground for CDL drivers at a significant upfront cost. So the employee arrives with no CDL, and after about a 2-month period and the upfront costs, the employee has a very valuable CDL license. The companies bear the cost of the ELDT exam as well as the training. In 2022, for example, Lynn Pepco hired and trained 22 CDL drivers. The total cost for the curriculum, training hours for instructors and students, both in the classroom and behind the wheel, amounted to over $100,000 and about a little over $8,000 per driver. As Mr. Kier also mentioned, our drivers are coming out with valuable CDL licenses, and there's nothing to stop them from, after receiving their licenses, going and taking a better offer at a different company. There is little to no legal recourse for these employers who are training the drivers through this program at much cost, as mentioned, to actually have any way to recoup the funds that they have invested in these employees at the beginning. So we're very thankful for Senator Erdman bringing this bill. Another issue, and I know that Director Lamb is sitting behind me, but another issue that is facing us is the lack of time slots and availability of the testing for the CDL license. When calling for appointments, some of our drivers have been seeing 4-week wait times or more. And we even had a driver in Hastings that had to go to the next available option was to go and test in Papillion across the state. So we're doing as much as we can to fill these positions, but there's still a shortage, and any sort of investment up front from the state would be incredibly helpful. The other issue at play here is that in December, the state of Iowa DOT announced that they would be investing $6 million in their ELDT program. And I think we have a longstanding history of competing with Iowa and proving that we are superior in all things that we can do in Nebraska. And so in the spirit of competition, I hope that our state can also make an even bigger critical investment in CDL drivers. Again, thank you so much for bringing this bill, Senator Erdman. The Beverage Association and the Grocery Industry Association are in much support.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you. Any other proponents? Are there any opponents? Those that wish to testify in a neutral capacity? Seeing none? Senator Erdman, you are welcome to close.
Thank you, Senator. Guys, I'll make this brief. So if we see that some people have an idea how this should be handled and distributed, and I'm open to doing that tomorrow, all the community college presidents will be here for a very special event. We're going to take their authority to collect property tax. So I've heard from those, they will be in tomorrow for that bill. So maybe I'll have a chance to visit with them about how they might be able to handle this in the training of CDL drivers. So it might be okay. So, but that's what the intention, and I think it's important. I think Senator Brandt made a good point there. We need to find out the most efficient way to distribute the money.
Perfect. Great. Are there any questions for Senator Erdman? And with that, there were 3 letters sent in as proponents supporting this legislation. And with that, we will close this hearing and end for the day for LB 688. Thank you.